Chapter 1584, 1 against 2. Chapter 1584, 1 against 2. In terms of power they were evenly matched. As for unique skill, Jian Wushuang's reincarnation of the highest heaven and real God Shui Wu's 18 heavenly fire were both beginner rank 2 real God unique skills. Their power was about the same. However, Jian Wushuang's reincarnation of the highest heaven was an instant explosion of power after the power of sword principle gathered as one. It exploded the stronger power in an instant. On the other hand, real God Shui Wu's 18 heavenly fire were segregated into 18 continuous attacks and the power was spread. If they were to meet force with force, how could it be evenly matched with Jian Wushuang's reincarnation of the highest heaven? Naturally, it would only be suppressed. When they fought head-on, it wouldn't win against Jian Wushuang. Then Jian Wushuang immediately launched his martial art motion. Shadows flashed in madness and appeared next to real God Shui Wu occasionally to perform sword principle. His speed is getting even faster. Real God Shui Wu had 6 arms and carried a hammer in every arm. But then he was shocked. Previously, he had dealt with Jian Wushuang's martial art motion with ease with his 6 arms. However, Jian Wushuang's martial art motion was obviously much faster than before. Even though he had 6 arms, it was rather difficult to keep up with Jian Wushuang's speed. Most importantly, when Jian Wushuang performed a sword principle, there was consciousness attack too. The consciousness attack was very fierce, even he found it difficult to withstand. With such combination he was stifled in the battle with Jian Wushuang. Suppress. He was steadily losing ground. The surrounding experts who were watching the battle saw the sight and everyone looked in disbelief. A universe god can press against an eternal real god? How is it possible? I can tell that real God Shui Wu already gave his all, but he is still cornered. Jian Wushuang is too scary. Scary. The people who were watching the battle could only use the word scary to describe Jian Wushuang. Just as real God Shui Wu was steadily losing ground from Jian Wushuang's attack and was near defeat, there was a crimson figure that plunged over the void from afar. He arrived at the battlefield very soon. It's real God Shi Jue. 4 Symbol Mansion's second eternal real god in Burning Demon region. Mr. Shi Jue is here. It immediately stirred a great commotion around the battlefield. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and looked at the visitor. The person was an elderly in a crimson long robe. He had a pair of blade-like eyebrows. At that very moment, the pair of blade-like eyebrows were faintly knitted as he looked in the direction of Jian Wushuang. A universe god suppressed Shui Wu head-on? If he didn't see it with his own eyes, real God Shi Jue wouldn't believe it. This young man is extremely strong. Shi Jue, team up with me to kill him. Real God Shui Wu, who was suppressed by Jian Wushuang, shouted. Real God Shi Jue squinted his eyes, but he didn't hesitate and barged into the battlefield instantly. Another one, Jian Wushuang wasn't afraid. With the combination of his martial art motion and soul attack, he fought against the 2 eternal real gods head-on. He fought against 2 alone. In the end, he only had the lower hand by a slight bit. This young man, he was only a universe god. But when his power exploded, it felt like he isn't much weaker compared to us eternal real gods. His martial art motion was too creepy. And his comprehension towards doctrines is too high. Real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu were complimenting in silence. In terms of power, they weren't afraid of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang put all his tricks to play in collaboration with his secret skills, and he barely increased his power to the level of an ordinary eternal real god standard. One should know that the 2 eternal real gods also knew secret skills that increased their power. If they were to perform it, they would definitely be more powerful than Jian Wushuang. The reason why Jian Wushuang wasn't afraid of them and couldn't fight against them head-on was that Jian Wushuang's comprehension towards the power of Heaven Wei was too high. If I'm not mistaken, his comprehension towards reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine has already surpassed the 2nd level in Doctrine Palace, and not even that far away from the 3rd level. With such a comprehension level, one could be categorized as monstrous, even among void real gods, let alone the fact that he is only a universe god. Real God Shi Jue found it unbelievable. One must know that the comprehension of power of Heaven Wei would be more difficult at a later stage. An ordinary void real god would only need to possess comprehension towards the power of Heaven Wei that could pass the 1st level in Doctrine Palace, and he will be categorized as the peak among void real god. As for the 2nd level in Doctrine Palace, it was the standard of an ordinary eternal real god. Many eternal real gods' comprehension of doctrines stopped at that level and most of the time were only limited to one single doctrine. How about Jian Wushuang? He comprehended 2 doctrines also and has already reached the standard of an eternal real God or maybe even higher. Besides, the reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine that he comprehended were both supreme doctrines. Comprehension of supreme doctrines is much more difficult compared to a 9-heaven God doctrine. After a ferocious fight, although real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu gave full play to their power and put Jian Wushuang at a disadvantage, the situation was only confined to that. If they intended to cause severe damage to Jian Wushuang or to kill him, it was impossible. Just then, Virum. The entire void suddenly quivered. At the back of the battlefield, at the volcano that everyone had forgotten about, the prohibition that covered the volcano suddenly collapsed. A large amount of power dispersed with the prohibition. As it dispersed, there was a faint blade light that rampaged. The sudden change of circumstances attracted everyone's attention. Even Jian Wushuang, real God Shi Jue, and real God Shui Wu who were fighting, looked towards the source of the movement. Finally, Jian Wushuang looked delighted. Real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu creased their eyebrows. At the end of their sight, also the middle of the prohibition that was dispersing, there was a cold figure that was taking a stride forward slowly. He was in a white robe, carrying a saber on his back. His face was cold, yet extraordinarily handsome. Then, on the battlefield, everyone's attention was caught by the figure in a white robe that was taking a huge stride forward. That is, Duan Lingfeng. Then the experts at the scene recalled that the direct cause of the incident wasn't Jian Wushuang but Duan Lingfeng. But Jian Wushuang displayed a terrifying power, an insane massacre, and everyone's attention was caught. On the contrary, they were distracted from Duan Lingfeng. Until then, Duan Lingfeng only revealed himself before everyone. Then the experts at the scene could faintly feel the aura that was given out by Duan Lingfeng's body. That's a real god? Suddenly everyone was stunned. Chapter 1585, Real God Duan Lingfeng. Chapter 1585, Real God Duan Lingfeng. Real God. Duan Lingfeng has made a breakthrough? How is that possible? Apart from Jian Wushuang, everyone else present was extremely shocked. It must be known that when Duan Lingfeng was escaping from the 4-symbol mansion previously, he was only a universe god. In just tens of years' time, which was considered short, he had actually made a breakthrough to a real god. Was real god so easy to make a breakthrough to? Swoosh. Jian Wushuang shook himself free from real god Shi Jue and real god Shui Wu easily and went to Duan Lingfeng. Took you long enough to make a breakthrough, that's really slow, Jian Wushuang chuckled. If you were a bit slower, I would have stolen your limelight. It is not easy to make a breakthrough to a real god, Duan Lingfeng spoke, and his eyes looked around the area soon after. When Duan Lingfeng saw the ground, which was filled with bodies of real gods, he raised his eyebrows and his eyes were filled with surprise. Straight after that, he looked at real god Shi Jue and real god Shui Wu who were in front of him. 2 eternal real gods? Duan Lingfeng's eyes shrank. Indeed, there are 2 of them, Jian Wushuang said. How strong are they? Duan Lingfeng questioned. They should be normal eternal real gods and their abilities are not too strong. If you really want to know who is stronger, that real god Shi Jue is slightly stronger, Jian Wushuang said. Jian Wushuang had fought with the 2 real gods before. Hence, he naturally had a rough estimation of their abilities. Since that's the case, leave real god Shi Jue to me and I shall leave the other one to you, Duan Lingfeng said. No problem, Jian Wushuang shrugged his shoulders without a care in the world. Duan Lingfeng then walked over to real god Shi Jue immediately while being observed by many experts around the area. Although he was walking slowly, his steps were heavy and filled with strength. As such, every step was like a drumstick hitting real god Shi Jue's heart ruthlessly. The expressions of real god Shi Jue and the experts of the 4-symbol mansion who rushed over became unusually grave. In the eternal chaotic world, those who were able to get into the top 10 of the universe god ranking list, even though they were only universe gods, had abilities very close to that of a peak void real god. As for those who were able to get into the top 3 of the universe god ranking list, they definitely possessed the fighting capabilities of a peak void real god. Previously, Duan Lingfeng had been one of the top 3 of the universe god ranking list. When he was still a universe god, his fighting capabilities had been equivalent to that of a peak void real god. However, at that moment he had made a breakthrough to a real god. Hence, how strong could he be? Would he be able to compete against an eternal real god? As the audience thought about it, Duan Lingfeng made his move. The 15th. The saber behind Duan Lingfeng was unsheathed and he held it tightly in his hands. After giving a shout and with a surge of real god-level divine power, buzz, 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 many towering crimson saber shadows appeared out of thin air from the higher part of the sky. Every saber shadow was extremely huge. Moreover, the power that every saber shadow emitted was enough to make a normal void real god terrified. However, a total of 15 crimson saber shadows had appeared in the higher part of sky. After the 15 crimson saber shadows appeared, they came together and fused at a frightening speed. In just a short amount of time, the 15 saber shadows had completely fused into one saber shadow. This saber shadow was scarlet in color, dazzling and unparalleled. Under the fearful gaze of the two eternal real gods, real God Shi Jue and real God Shui, the saber shadow descended and its target was real God Shi Jue. Real God Shi Jue had already blown up his two dashing eyebrows and he had a grave expression. In addition, his eyes were glowing brilliantly. At that moment, a great amount of red flames rose from his body and his two palms went completely red. With a wave of his right hand, he moved the red flames around him and in the next moment, Emperor-level blood fire destruction. Boom boom. An extremely tall giant wave, composed of only red flames, appeared. The sea of fire was monstrous and it was burning everything in the universe crazily. Straight after that, the tall and enormous red fire wave clashed with the scarlet, dazzling crimson saber shadow head-on. As soon as they clashed, a great amount of saber shadow and red flames dissipated at once and spread through the surroundings madly. The void and ground around the area welcomed a storm that would bring about the end of the world. However, all of a sudden, at the core of the clash between the two attacks, another crack formed at the center of the tall and enormous red fire wave abruptly. At the start, the crack had been very small. However, it started to spread at an incredible speed. In a short amount of time, the tall, enormous red fire wave split into two. Within the crack, the crimson saber shadow that Duan Lingfeng had unleashed was still glowing brilliantly with a crimson light and it headed straight for real God Shi Jue. Puff. Real God Shi Jue gave a groan and his expression turned pale at once. Moreover, some blood had flowed out from the corners of his mouth and his body retreated miserably. Duan Lingfeng raised his head, shot a glance at real God Shi Jue and swung his palm immediately. Darkness region. All of a sudden, unlimited darkness enshrouded the whole universe and Duan Lingfeng was like the emperor of the darkness. His eyes glowed with a shrill light and with a change of his body, he appeared in front of real God Shi Jue. Right after that, frightening murderous intent burst forth abruptly. A vast blood mist then changed into a sea of blood which covered him and real God Shi Jue completely in an instant. Jianghu Xuan and many experts from the four-symbol mansion were watching from the sidelines. However, at that moment, they could only see the sea of blood and hear crazy clashing sounds which came from the sea of blood continuously. However, they were unable to see what was happening within the sea of blood. There was an intense clash and insane sounds of thunder. In just an instant, which was even less than a breath's time, the sea of blood which had filled the sky dispersed. Duan Lingfeng and real God Shi Jue's bodies then appeared in front of everyone again. However, when the audience saw the conditions of the both of them at that moment, they were all surprised. At that moment, Duan Lingfeng was still in his white robe and he was extremely indifferent. Although he was in the sea of blood, his body did not have any bloodstains and his aura was extremely strong. As for real God Shi Jue, his hair was in a mess and his face was filled with blood. At the same time, one of his palms was cut off and he had lost his 5 fingers. Such a condition was really very tragic. Real God Shi Jue, an eternal god, was actually forced into this state in such a short amount of time? The people in the area who were observing the battle became stupefied. Even Jianghu Shuang's eyes shrank. He had fought with real God Shi Jue moments ago and his abilities were indeed not too bad. At the very least he was slightly stronger than real God Shui. In a one-to-one match, Jianghu Shuang had confidence that he could suppress real God Shi Jue. However, if he wanted to force real God Shi Jue into such a tragic state and even cut off half of his palm in such a short period of time, he was sure that he could not do it. However, Duan Lingfeng had managed to do it. After making a breakthrough to a real god, Duan Lingfeng's ability should be slightly stronger than mine, Jianghu Shuang thought. Chapter 1586, Identity Exposed? Chapter 1586, Identity Exposed? Duan Lingfeng. Real God Shi Jue, who was cornered, had fire in his eyes as he stared at Duan Lingfeng and bellowed, "What happened today? We at Four Symbol Mansion, definitely won't let it slip so easily. No matter where you go, we at Four Symbol Mansion will definitely hunt you down. And you, Jian Wushuang. Real God Shi Jue looked at Jian Wushuang and the hatred in his eyes grew stronger. You killed 30 void real gods in Four Symbol Mansion. Even if you have lineage of star to back you up, don't think they can shield you. Humph. Let's go. Then real God Shi Jue turned to leave immediately. Although the experts of Four Symbol Mansion refused to admit defeat, they had no alternative. They knew clearly that, with their current formation, it was impossible to keep Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng. On the contrary, they might be massacred instead. The other experts from Four Symbol Mansion would be rushing over, but it definitely required time. During that time, Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng definitely would have left. Who would be silly enough to stay back at the same spot? As they couldn't kill the two of them, they of course could only leave. Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng stood there coldly as they watched the experts of Four Symbol Mansion leave. What real God Shi Jue had said continued to reverberate in their ears, but they didn't worry. The two of them were top geniuses and they rose abruptly in adverse circumstances. They experienced countless challenges and failures. They naturally wouldn't be bothered by the threat that Four Symbol Mansion pulled. Jian Wushuang, thank you. Duan Lingfeng looked at Jian Wushuang. Between you and I, it's necessary. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and said, let's make a move first. This is still within Four Symbol Land, in Four Symbol Mansion's territory after all. Although the experts of Four Symbol Mansion left, it is hard to say if they would charge against us again. By then, experts like Chaotic Real God might attend to us personally. Regardless of Jian Wushuang of Duan Lingfeng, they knew their limitations. They could only be evenly matched with an ordinary Eternal Real God at most. If they were to run into Eternal Real God who was slightly stronger or on the peak, they could only flee. If they were to run into Chaotic Real God, whichever Chaotic Real God they sent could easily kill the two of them. Let's go, Duan Lingfeng nodded. Very soon the two of them left. The experts of Four Symbol Mansion, Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng left one after another. The remaining were the experts who came because of the 10 billion Chaos Gem bounty. Then there was bedlam among the experts. They had witnessed a shocking battle with their own eyes. From their point of view, the battle was unbelievable. In the void outside Four Symbol Land, few were finally out. Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng let out a breath of relief. In no time, a figure appeared before Jian Wushuang. Mr. Lei Chao. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly at the person. Duan Lingfeng looked humble too. I originally thought I have to take action personally. But from what it seems, I belittled the two of you. Lei Chao looked at Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng and flashed a rare smile. Jian Wushuang laughed in silence. The message for Lei Chao to take action was a plan for the worst. It would definitely cause the relationship between Four Symbol Mansion and Lineage of Star to break entirely. However, although Jian Wushuang had killed many real gods of Four Symbol Mansion, it was considered Jian Wushuang's individual act. Four Symbol Mansion could at most reprimand Lineage of Star, but not to the point where they would instigate war against Lineage of Star. Let's go. Let's return first, Lei Chao said. Jian Wushuang nodded and he sent a message to Hall Master Yuan to inform him of the ins and outs of the story. As long as you leave alive. As for Four Symbol Mansion, don't worry so much. As long as you don't go into Four Symbol Land, they can't do anything to you, Hall Master Yuan chuckled. Oh yeah, Hall Master Yuan, I have to tell you something. Jian Wushuang's voice became solemn. What is it? Hall Master Yuan asked. In Burning Demon Region, I did not conceal my power and aura. I am only a universe god after all, but I revealed my fighting power to be far beyond what the scope of a universe god could achieve. So, I'm afraid my identity of an inverse cultivator won't be secret anymore, Jian Wushuang said. Is that so? Hall Master Yuan nodded faintly. Actually, when you were heading to Burning Demon Region earlier, I had already thought of that. No choice. The treasure that Palace Master refined for you could only allow you to conceal your aura as a universe god at most, but it won't allow you to pretend to be a real god. After all, real gods and universe gods are entirely different. Hence, unless you continue to hide your power and not fight, you will definitely expose your identity when you launch an attack. Well, let it be then. You'll expose yourself one day anyway. It doesn't matter. Plus, you have become more powerful. Even when you run into danger, you can deal with it. You will just have to be more cautious in the future. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded and let out a breath of relief in his heart. He knew that once his identity as an inverse cultivator was revealed, he would definitely draw a lot of trouble. However, the trouble would come anyway. He had mentally prepared long ago. In 4-symbol land, in 4-symbol mansion. In a lofty hall, the higher-ups of 4-symbol mansion gathered. Real God Shi Jue and real God Shui were among them too, but the two of them looked slightly anxious. On the high seat of the hall, there was a man with an imposing manner in a purple robe seated there. At that very moment, the imposing man looked around and his cold voice reverberated in the hall. 2 eternal real God and dozens of void real gods launched attack simultaneously. In the end, you are heavily defeated by 2 universe gods. There were 30 void real gods that died. We at 4-symbol mansion are so embarrassed. Hearing what the imposing man said, everyone at the hall's faces grew grave. 4-symbol mansion became a laughing stock. Qihua Shui Wu, you are the 2 persons involved. Tell me what happened. The imposing man overlooked the 2 of them. Real God Qihua and real God Shui Wu exchanged a look. Then the former took a deep breath and said solemnly, Mansion Master, what happened today is my and Shui Wu's mistake. We cannot push away the blame. Regardless of how Mansion Master plans to punish us, we have no comment. But before that, I'd like to explain. The experts in the hall looked at real God Qihua. Firstly, both Duan Lingfeng and Jianghu Xuan were both top geniuses. In terms of gifted talent among universe gods and eternal chaotic world, they are really at the peak. Even as universe gods, their powers shouldn't be belittled. Secondly, when we found Duan Lingfeng, he had already broken through and become a real god. In terms of power, he is definitely above me. Chapter 1587, Inverse Cultivator? Chapter 1587, Inverse Cultivator? Oh. Many experts within the big hall revealed a surprised expression, and one of them spoke straight away. Real God Qihua, Duan Lingfeng is definitely a genius. However, he has only just made a breakthrough to a real god. Hence, no matter how impressive he is, it's still not possible for him to be stronger than you, right? Many of you are clueless. Within the burning demon region back then, as soon as Duan Lingfeng made a breakthrough, he fought with me straight away. Moreover, it was a close-quarters battle and I did my best. In the end, in just a short amount of time, at best 2 or 3 breaths time, he forced me into a miserable state and even cut half my palm off, real God Qihua said. That? The experts within the big hall had puzzled expressions. When I fought Duan Lingfeng, I could tell that he had a high comprehension of the massacre doctrine and darkness doctrine. If I'm not wrong, they have both reached the stage where they could clear the 2nd level of the Doctrine Palace. Moreover, his saber skills are very shocking and his secret skills are extremely powerful. I am indeed not his opponent, real God Qihua said. No one could help becoming silent. Real God Qihua was an eternal real god and he would definitely feel a bit arrogant. Thus, he would naturally not lie and acknowledge that he was inferior to someone who had just made a breakthrough to a real god. In actual fact, compared to Duan Lingfeng, that Jianghu Xuan is more frightening, real God Qihua said. The experts looked over immediately. Jianghu Xuan is merely a universe god. However, his abilities are so strong that they have achieved the level of an eternal god as well. This is very impressive as he has completely exceeded the realm of a universe god. If my guess is not wrong, Jianghu Xuan should be an inverse cultivator, real God Qihua said earnestly. What? No one in the big hall could remain calm and a few people stood up directly. Even the intimidating purple-robed man, who was at the highest part of the big palace, looked at real God Qihua immediately. Qihua, you said that Jianghu Xuan is an inverse cultivator? On what basis? The intimidating man questioned. It's just my own prediction. I have a video of Jianghu Xuan fighting in the burning demon region. All of you can take a look as well. Real God Qihua took out a token and with a thought, the video that the token recorded appeared at the center of the big hall immediately. The high-level experts of the 4-symbol mansion were also watching carefully. The first thing they saw was Jianghu Xuan fighting with 4 peak void real gods. In the end, after facing each other twice, one of them was killed and 3 of them were forced to retreat. After that, many void real gods of the 4-symbol mansion besieged Jianghu Xuan at the same time. However, they were massacred by Jianghu Xuan mercilessly. Next, it was Jianghu Xuan fighting with real God Shui Wu, and finally, with 1 against 2, he fought against both real God Qihua and real God Shui Wu at the same time. After watching the video, the big hall became completely silent. It was deathly silent. Completely silent. The high-level experts of the 4-symbol mansion were completely stunned. It could not be helped. Even they were unable to believe what had happened in that video. A universe god had massacred a big group of void real gods easily and also pushed back an eternal real god. Finally, with 1 against 2, he had fought against 2 eternal real gods fiercely and was only at a disadvantaged position. Was that really a universe god? Looking purely at his abilities alone, Jian Wuxuang has definitely exceeded the realm that it was thought he could achieve. Over the many years in the eternal chaotic world, apart from a few inverse cultivators, there has never been a universe god with abilities that have achieved such a level. However, from just this point alone, we still cannot say for sure that he is an inverse cultivator. There is also a possibility of him getting a very huge opportunity which will result in his abilities surpassing all the universe gods in history, the intimidating man said. From this point alone, we are indeed unable to confirm for sure. However, not to forget, not long ago Jian Wuxuang was reduced to a disabled person. Not long after going through the fight in Wu Bei's cave, news of him being poisoned by a potent poison and losing all his abilities was spread. This piece of news had been confirmed a long time ago. Moreover, there were even quite a number of people who had seen with their very eyes that Jian Wuxuang was merely a white-haired old man and he did not have any divine power in his body at all. After that, there was a rumor that he went to a mystery land where ordinary people lived and it seemed like he had planned to stay in that world forever. That was definitely his most miserable period of time and he stayed in that state for more than 20,000 years. It is only in the present day that he reappeared in front of us. However, when he reappeared, not only did his abilities recover, his abilities also skyrocketed. What does this mean? Real God Shi Jue's eyes looked around at the surroundings. Inverse cultivation test. The intimidating purple-robed man, who was at the highest part of the big hall, squinted his eyes slightly. That's right. It's the inverse cultivation test. Real God Shi Jue laughed coldly. The lineage of Star said that some people had plotted against Jian Wuxuang and caused him to be poisoned by a potent poison. However, who has heard of such a matter? It must have been made up by the lineage of Star themselves. Moreover, even if he were to be poisoned by a potent poison, why would he lose all his abilities and be reduced to a normal old man? I have never heard of such a poison before. Even if it does exist, it must be an extremely frightening and high-level poison in the eternal chaotic world that has disappeared a long time ago. However, if it's really that kind of poison, how did the lineage of Star cure it for him? Not to mention raise his abilities greatly as well. Hence, there is only one possibility that caused him to lose his abilities completely and that is the inverse cultivation test. As for him recovering his abilities, that's because he cleared the inverse cultivation test and made a breakthrough. With that, his abilities would naturally skyrocket as well. In other words, back then when he had been roaming around in Wu Bei's cave, Jian Wuxuang was only a universe god of the second heaven and it was only until not long ago that he made a breakthrough to become a universe god of the third heaven. Everyone at the big palace looked at one another and nodded their heads. It was obvious that they agreed with real God Shi Jue's words. Only the inverse cultivation test could explain everything that had happened to Jian Wuxuang. With this, it was enough to explain why a universe god like Jian Wuxuang would possess such frightening abilities. It was because of the fact that he was an inverse cultivator and it was not something that could be explained with normal understanding. The lineage of Star actually has a disciple who is an inverse cultivator? Moreover, he has already grown to such a level. They have really hidden him well, the intimidating purple-robed man spoke with a low voice. Umph. With a cold hum, the intimidating man stood up straight away and his eyes were extremely cold. Originally, the lineage of Star had no connection with us. However, this time round, their disciple has killed more than 30 of our real gods. Therefore we cannot let this matter pass just like this. Isn't Jian Wuxuang an inverse cultivator? With just that point alone, there should be many people in the eternal chaotic world who want to kill him, especially those who see the lineage of Star as their enemy. After all, everyone knows how much potential an inverse cultivator has. As such, we shall let all these people take care of Jian Wuxuang. Make the news of Jian Wuxuang being an inverse cultivator public immediately. I want to let the whole eternal chaotic world, including those dark powerhouses who are hidden in the darkness, know about this piece of news. I will make sure that he will not dare to take even half a step out of the lineage of Star ever again. Chapter 1588, All Parties Shocked. Chapter 1588, All Parties Shocked. There were many solo experts where the battle in Burning Demon region took place. Hence, the news about the battle couldn't be contained even if they wanted it to be. After the battle ended, it immediately spread at a terrifying speed like wildfire. Especially the mirror image of the battle. The mirror image recorded clearly that Jian Wushuang had massacred many real gods of Four Symbol Mansion with his power of Universe God. There was even a scene where he had suppressed an eternal real god. As the image spread, whichever experts saw the images were astonished. There were almost 40 void real gods that hemmed in a universe god at the same time, but they were massacred instead. How could it be? Is he really just a universe god? In the history of eternal chaotic world, was there any universe god this scary? Everyone found it unbelievable. Vientiane Tower even amended and announced the latest universe god ranking list at the first instant. As Jian Wushuang had lost all his power previously, his name was removed from the universe god ranking list long ago. But then, when the new universe god ranking list was announced, he was listed in the first place directly. There was no doubt about the ranking. Everyone found it right and reasonable. Even though he had never fought against God-destroying King, who was in the first place from the terrifying power and the result that he displayed in the battle at Burning Demon Region, he was far beyond God-destroying King. After all, although God-destroying King was a top genius, he couldn't fight against an eternal real god head-on, let alone corner him. Monster. Monstrosity. In the history of the entire eternal chaotic world, he is a superb monster that is hard to come by. All kinds of names were given to Jian Wushuang, and Jian Wushuang became a synonym for monster. However, Four Symbol Mansion also spread other news. Jian Wushuang was an inverse cultivator. The news was simple, but it was like a stone that created thousands of ripples. The higher-ups and experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries, even a number of almighties were startled by the news. The higher-ups and experts were all knowledgeable and they quickly determined that the news was a fact. They could tell from the power that Jian Wushuang displayed and also from the incident where he lost all his power temporarily. Jian Wushuang was no doubt a true inverse cultivator. Only the legendary inverse cultivator could possess such unbelievable power at the stage of universe god. Inverse cultivator. The eternal chaotic world was the scariest and most unique existence. They were born to go against the world, they were born to be different. The potential of an inverse cultivator was far beyond an ordinary cultivator. If it was an inverse cultivator who had yet to pass through inverse cultivation tests, they might not need to be worried. After all, inverse cultivation tests were the biggest threshold as an inverse cultivator. Among 10 inverse cultivators there might not even be one who could pass through. But once he passed through 3 inverse cultivation tests, his potential would be unboundedly great. Sky Sword Mountain, under the 9 lofty sword mountains in the secretive cave dwelling. Haha, Jian Wushuang is an inverse cultivator. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain, who carried 3 swords on his back, looked just like an enduring, fierce sword. He received the news and let out a hearty laugh. An inverse cultivator and one who already passed all inverse cultivation tests. Such potential, another Wu Bei. Back when Wu Bei rose up at an unbelievably fast speed, he shocked all almighties in eternal chaotic world. It is a pity that there was an unexpected incident that led him to his deathbed. Otherwise, unless the few almighties from Sanctuary Alliance teamed up, in 10 cultivation sanctuaries, there wouldn't have been anyone who could have made him yield. Jian Wushuang seems to be even more outstanding than when Wu Bei was a universe god. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain complimented as he smiled. He was involved with Jian Wushuang and could just about say that they shared a relationship. Hence, he naturally was delighted to see Jian Wushuang's growth. In a crimson territory there was an overlord. It was Huoyu. Not only was Huoyu an almighty, but he was also considered one who was extremely strong among the almighties. He could be on an equal footing as the founder of lineage of Star Palace Master. Haha, Star Palace old man, I followed our agreement and never exposed the young man's identity. In the end he was the one who exposed himself. I can't be blamed. In the lofty crimson hall, Huoyu, who had a unicorn on his forehead, laughed wantonly. TSK. An inverse cultivator and he passed through all inverse cultivation tests. Lineage of Star has obtained an impressive little guy. It was a dark, starry night. There was a piece of dark land floating in the starry night. In the dark land, there were lofty mountains and all the mountains were hundreds of thousands of zhang high. Even the smaller ones were more than 10,000 zhang high. Right in the middle of the countless mountains, there was a dark palace in the air. In the spacious hall, a figure in a black robe suddenly appeared in the hall. He shouted anxiously, "There's an important report." On both sides of the hall, guards who were engulfed in the dim light immediately looked at the figure in black robe. There were some who glanced with a furious gaze. What report makes you so anxious? A low yet hoarse voice reverberated in the hall. The voice was coming from all directions, but no one knew where the person who was speaking was. The figure in a black robe had already knelt down and looked politely at the empty throne right in front of the hall. Master, I have received the news that the genius Jian Wushuang, who was removed from the must-kill name list in our tribe previously, his power has recovered. Not only did he recover his power, but he has also become even stronger than before. With his power as a universe god, he suppressed an eternal real god. Vientiane Tower in 10 cultivation sanctuaries listed him on the first place on universe god ranking list. On top of that, I receive a piece of credible news that Jian Wushuang is an inverse cultivator. The reason he lost all his power entirely was that he was in the progress of passing through his third inverse cultivation power. Now he has already passed through it. Inverse cultivator? The hoarse voice spoke again, an inverse cultivator who has already passed inverse cultivation tests and suppressed an eternal real god with his power as universe god. Isn't this Jian Wushuang more monstrous than real god Wu Bei back then? Yes. The figure in a black robe nodded continuously. Many experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries, including the Almighty, said that Jian Wushuang could totally be compared favorably with real god Wu Bei, or even surpass real god Wu Bei and be compared favorably with the few higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. No way. A low bellow suddenly burst through the dark hall. Real god Wu Bei is within the range that our tribe can accept, but the few higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. Such experts, any extra headcount can increase Sanctuary Alliance's power tremendously. We definitely can't let Jian Wushuang have a chance to reach that level. Send down my command. Immediately list Jian Wushuang in the top must-kill name list. Chapter 1589 New Deacon. Chapter 1589, New Deacon. Level 1, the black-robed man could not help but be stunned. In the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, many top geniuses and experts were on their list of must-kills. Moreover, the list of must-kills was split according to different levels. In particular, the highest level was level 1, and this class of people was made up of people who they wished to kill the most. Before this, there were only 3 people on level 1 of the list of must-kills. However, at that very moment, another person was added to the list. At the same time as the experts of the whole eternal chaotic world were shocked by the abilities that Jian Wushuang displayed and his identity as an inverse cultivator, Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng had already left the colored glaze sanctuary. Jian Wushuang, let's part here, Duan Lingfeng said. All right. In any case, there is still the transmission token. If you come across any trouble in the future, you can just send a message to me, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Duan Lingfeng nodded his head slightly. After that, he left alone. As for Lei Chao, who was by the side, he was looking on quietly. It was only after Duan Lingfeng left that he murmured, "This Duan Lingfeng is indeed a very outstanding genius. However, it's a pity that he dislikes being bound to a sect." During the period of time where they were traveling, Lei Chao had tried to invite Duan Lingfeng to join the lineage of Star. However, he was rejected by Duan Lingfeng. There are pros and cons of joining a sect. However, Duan Lingfeng is quite unsociable and he does not want to join a sect. That is pretty normal as well, Jian Wushuang said. From knowing Duan Lingfeng and interacting with him, Jian Wushuang knew what kind of person Duan Lingfeng was. Let's return to the lineage of Star. I have not gone back for a very long time, Jian Wushuang laughed. Yes, Lei Chao nodded his head. The two of them headed toward the lineage of Star at once. At the lineage of Star, inside the cave that was created by special gems, Hall Master Yuan and more than 10 deacons of the lineage of Star had gathered together and they were staring at the video in front of them in detail. The video was currently playing the scene where Jian Wushuang unleashed his killing spree in all directions of the burning demon region. This martial art motion is amazing. A total of close to 100 shadows. Gosh. Look, the real gods of the four-symbol mansion have become stupefied one by one. They have all been surprised by the abilities that Jian Wushuang displayed. The deacons were talking and all their eyes were glowing brilliantly. It was only after a long time that they finished watching the video. What followed after that was a sigh. Previously, we still felt that it was such a pity that Jian Wushuang had lost all his abilities and was reduced to a disabled person. However, who could have thought that Jian Wushuang was actually an inverse cultivator and he was undergoing the inverse cultivation test previously? I did not expect the lineage of Star to actually have an inverse cultivator as its disciple. Moreover, this inverse cultivator has also cleared all the inverse cultivation tests. It must be our luck. Perhaps many big powerhouses in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries will all be envious of us now. All of the deacons had excited expressions. Humph, when Jian Wushuang lost all his abilities back then, all of your attitudes were not like this. Hall Master Yuan's dissatisfied voice could be heard, and this caused the deacons present to become embarrassed at once. Human beings were all pragmatic. In the past, when Jian Wushuang had lost all his abilities, the deacons no longer had a good opinion of Jian Wushuang, and they had even tried to get Hall Master Yuan to give up on Jian Wushuang by not giving him many resources. However, at that moment, after knowing the full details of the matter, the deacons naturally felt a bit diffident. Hall Master Yuan, if my guess is not wrong, you have known Jian Wushuang's real identity since a long time ago, right? A red-clothed woman asked. Yes, I know, Hall Master Yuan nodded his head. That explains it, the deacons understood immediately. It was no wonder that Hall Master Yuan had always treated Jian Wushuang well. For example, even though Jian Wushuang had lost all his abilities for such a long period of time, he still withstood the pressure for Jian Wushuang forcefully. It was actually due to the fact that he knew Jian Wushuang was undergoing the inverse cultivation test a long time ago. Hall Master Yuan's expression changed abruptly, and he looked around the surroundings straight away. Jian Wushuang and Lei Chao have returned. Everyone, do you want to follow me to welcome the both of them back? All the deacons looked at one another and nodded their heads immediately. With Hall Master Yuan at the front, tens of deacons headed to the entrance of the endless Milky Way at once. This also attracted the attention of many Star Palace disciples right away. What's going on? By the looks of it, Hall Master Yuan and the deacons are planning to go to the entrance of the endless Milky Way. Why are they going there? Let's go and take a look as well. A number of disciples of the lineage of Star followed at once. It was only when everyone reached the entrance of the endless Milky Way that they stopped moving. In no time, two shadows appeared in the lines of vision of everyone. Be it the deacons or the disciples, all of them knew the two of them. It's Lord Lei Chao, and the other person is Jian Wushuang. It's senior brother Wushuang. From the looks of it, he has recovered from his poison. Indeed, he has recovered. I can feel the divine power from his body. The exceptional genius from the past has returned. The disciples of the lineage of Star caused a commotion straight away. From Jian Wushuang's battle in the burning demon region to that moment, only tens of days had passed. Although the news of that battle had already spread, most of the normal Star Palace disciples did not know about it. As such, they were naturally surprised when they saw Jian Wushuang at that moment. Swoosh! Hall Master Yuan and his group of people welcomed Jian Wushuang and Lei Chao back at once. Jian Wushuang, welcome back. Hall Master Yuan wore a smile on his face. Hall Master Yuan. Deacons? Jian Wushuang spoke modestly. No need to stand on ceremony. Hall Master Yuan waved his hands and said, Today the deacons and I have come here together so that we can welcome you back. Secondly, we have come to announce something. Oh. Jian Wushuang's expression changed. The deacons around the area, as well as the disciples who were observing from a distance away, all revealed a puzzled expression. From today onwards, the lineage of Star will have another deacon, and he is Jian Wushuang. Hall Master Yuan's voice was extensive. By spreading it with divine power intentionally, his voice spread to each and every corner of the lineage of Star. With that, almost every disciple of the lineage of Star heard the announcement. Atop the Milky Way, the deacons behind Hall Master Yuan looked at one another and nodded their heads. As for Jian Wushuang, he had a confused expression. Let's go. We shall continue this inside the cave, Hall Master Yuan laughed. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and the group of them headed to the cave that Hall Master Yuan had mentioned immediately. However, at that moment, the big lineage of Star was in a complete uproar. Many disciples were totally dumbfounded. What's going on? Why did Jian Wushuang become a new deacon out of nowhere? Isn't he still in the Qingtian mystery land and living the life of a normal person? Moreover, there were rumors a long time ago saying that there's no chance of him ever making a comeback. However, now, could it be that his abilities have recovered? Even if his abilities have recovered, that doesn't mean that he can become a deacon directly, right? Chapter 1590 Threshold of Real God. Chapter 1590 Threshold of Real God. In lineage of Star, deacon elderlies were generally eternal real gods. The disciples could clearly see that there was really a fluctuation of divine power in Jian Wushuang. However, the aura that he gave out was only a universe god's. A universe god acting as a deacon elder? Are you kidding me? Just as the disciples were in shock and confusion, the latest universe god ranking list finally spread among them. They instantly found out about the shocking result that Jian Wushuang had displayed in the battle that took place in Burning Demon region. At the same time, they found out Jian Wushuang's identity and knew that he was an inverse cultivator. On top of that, they also found out that during the 2 times when Jian Wushuang had participated in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace, he had concealed his true realm. Firstly, he had participated in a battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace among Universe God in the second heaven when he was a Universe God in the first heaven. He had won against many disciples in lineage of Star and was only second to the most outstanding Lingfeng among Universe God in the second heaven. Secondly, Jian Wushuang had participated in a battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace among Universe God in the third heaven when he was a Universe God in the second heaven. Then he was the first place without a doubt. He had joined battles in a cross-ranking, but he had suppressed all the other geniuses in the end. The disciples in lineage of Star finally understood Jian Wushuang was a scary monster. When they found out about the ins and outs of the matter, most of the disciples were dumbfounded. In the cave dwelling that was made of unique crystals. Jian Wushuang, this is the token of a deacon elderly. Keep it properly. From today, you're no longer a disciple of lineage of Star but one of the higher-ups of lineage of Star. Hall Master Yuan passed the token to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took it and held it in his hand. He looked confused. The surrounding deacon elderly shared a look, but there was no grievance. Jian Wushuang had already proved himself using his result. He had the fighting power of an eternal real god. If so, he, of course, could become a deacon elderly and stand side by side with them. Elder Wushuang, from today onwards you're one of us. Elder Wushuang. The surrounding deacon elderlies greeted him. Everyone is so courteous, Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. All right, dismissed. I have something to talk to Jian Wushuang about, Hall Master Yuan said. Many deacon elderlies including Lei Chao left. In the cave dwelling, only Jian Wushuang and Hall Master Yuan were left. Hall Master Yuan looked and said, Jian Wushuang, your power could be compared favorably with an eternal real god's. In 10 cultivation sanctuaries, you are considered one of the top experts. However, I have to remind you to be extremely cautious in action. After all, your identity as inverse cultivator has been revealed. There will be quite a few people in eternal chaotic world who want to kill you. Hall Master Yuan, who are the people who want me dead? They are enemies of lineage of Star? Jian Wushuang asked. Lineage of Star's enemies are just a part of them. These grievances are public and are easier to deal with. The ones that I'm warning you about are the hidden forces that are secretive, Hall Master Yuan squinted. Hidden forces? Jian Wushuang was surprised. These hidden forces specialize in assassinating geniuses and experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries. An inverse cultivator like you is definitely on their must-kill name list. You might even be really high in ranking. The hidden forces assassination measures are impressive and it is hard to prevent. They usually don't take action, but when they do, even lineage of Star will find it difficult to protect you, Hall Master Yuan said. There's such forces out there? Jian Wushuang's face changed. A force that had specialized in assassinating geniuses and experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Theoretically, such hidden forces should be a public enemy of 10 cultivation sanctuaries since long ago. But they had yet to be exterminated. The factor alone showed the hidden forces weren't ordinary. In short, be careful at all times. Of course, the hidden forces only conceal themselves in the dark. If there wasn't definite confidence, they wouldn't take action recklessly. Hence, don't let them find any opportunity, Hall Master Yuan said. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded and he grew solemn. Oh yeah, you just passed through the 3rd inverse cultivation test. You should have great room for improvement in terms of your power, right? Hall Master Yuan suddenly asked. Hearing that, Jian Wushuang smiled and replied, I do have some space for improvement. If so, seize the time to increase your power. Power is the most important thing to fall back on. If you were to be powerful enough, and you are already close, as long as you reach the level of real God Wu Bei, the hidden forces who intend to take action against you will have scruples. With your potential, you can totally achieve the standard of real God Wu Bei and even higher, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily, Hall Master Yuan, I should be able to cultivate the second episode of Shenmue Golden Body, but I'll need some auxiliary treasure. I hope you can prepare them for me. No problem, I'll send it over in a few days, Hall Master Yuan promised straightforwardly. Jian Wushuang immediately returned to Sword Star. Mister, you're back. Qiu Yu and the other maidservants saw Jian Wushuang and were thrilled when they found out that not only had Jian Wushuang recovered his power, he had also become a Deacon elderly of lineage of Star. Qiu Yu, you should have remained in the realm of Universe God in the third heaven for very long, right? Jian Wushuang looked at Qiu Yu. It has been hundreds of thousands of years, Qiu Yu nodded faintly. Hundreds of thousands of years within lineage of Star where she gets extra resources, but she didn't break through and become a real god? Jian Wushuang shook his head in silence. He knew that Qiu Yu had a slim hope to break through and become a real god. In the eternal chaotic world, after a universe god passed through his three gods tests, real god would aim to break into the realm of a real god. However, it wasn't that easy to break through and become a real god. There were countless universe god in eternal chaotic world and there were countless universe gods in the third heaven, but more than 99% of them wouldn't be able to break through and become real gods among the universe gods. It was because the threshold of real god was extremely high. Previously, Jian Wushuang heard from King of Venomous Worms. For a universe god to break through and become a real god, he had to fulfill 4 conditions. First, create a real god unique skill. Second, have consciousness at the real god level. Third, increase his power to his limit, to the point where there was no room for improvement. Fourth, have a chance to break through. Of the 4 conditions, not a single one could be omitted. However, out of the 4 conditions, merely the first and the second conditions itself could stop 90% of universe gods. After all, most of the universe gods had limited natural abilities. To be able to create a real god unique skill at the level of universe god, or for one's consciousness to reach a real god's level, it was a wild wish. Chapter 1591, the second volume of Shenmue Golden Body. Chapter 1591, the second volume of Shenmue Golden Body. For example, Qiu Yu had limited resources and she had barely met the requirements in terms of consciousness. However, to date she was still unable to create a real god-level unique skill. Moreover, Qiu Yu's weapon was a long spear. Thus, Jian Wushuang was unable to give her a lot of advice for her unique skill. The third requirement, to raise one's abilities to its maximum such that it could no longer increase anymore, was not difficult and many universe gods could do it. As for the last requirement, it was the most difficult and it was also totally impossible to predict. An opportunity to make a breakthrough. However, would the opportunity come when the person asked for it? For some universe gods, they had achieved the first 3 requirements. However, they were still stuck at universe gods for hundreds or even millions of years and were unable to make a breakthrough as they were unable to find an opportunity to do so. Take some of the universe gods in the universe god ranking list as an example. Looking at the god-destroying king, he had already fulfilled the first 3 requirements. However, he was unable to make a breakthrough as he could not find the opportunity to do so. As for people like Duan Lingfeng, they were very fortunate. Now, I have also achieved the universe god of the third heaven. Next, I should make preparations to make a breakthrough to become a real god. For the 4 requirements to make a breakthrough to a real god, I have achieved real god level unique skill and real god level consciousness. As for the 2 remaining requirements, Jian Wushuang could not help but shake his head. To Jian Wushuang, he was still far from achieving the highest level of abilities for his current realm. After all, he had only just achieved universe god of the third heaven and there was still room for his abilities to grow. Moreover, his current abilities were at the eruption stage. Hence, for him to raise his abilities to their maximum, he would definitely need quite a bit of time. As for the last requirement, the opportunity to make a breakthrough was vague with no foreshadowing it would come anytime and Jian Wushuang could not do anything about it. No matter what, I have to do my best to raise my abilities. Inside a secret room, Jian Wushuang was sitting up straight with his legs crossed. Hall Master Yuan had already sent someone to deliver the resources needed to cultivate the second volume of the Shenmue Golden Body to Jian Wushuang. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang started his training at once. Shenmue Golden Body was one of the lineage of Star's 4 secret skills and it was a secret skill to defend one's body. Previously, Jian Wushuang was only a universe god of the second heaven. However, with the aid of the Shenmue Golden Body, his body managed to reach the level of a normal real god. Thus, from that, one could see how strong the secret skill was. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang had achieved universe god of the third heaven. As such, he fulfilled the requirements to cultivate the second volume of Shenmue Golden Body. Time passed by. In the blink of an eye, 50 years had passed. Success. Jian Wushuang, who had closed his eyes tightly all the while, finally opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with happiness. When he was cultivating the first volume of Shenmue Golden Body back then, he had failed once during the process. Hence, he used a total of 15 years to cultivate the skill successfully. As for the second volume of Shenmue Golden Body, which was obviously more difficult than the first volume, he had managed to cultivate it successfully in 50 years' time. My body. Jian Wushuang was checking out his body at the very moment. As he clenched both his fists with strength, an explosive power burst forth and caused space to become distorted straight away. As expected. Since I have cultivated the second volume of Shenmue Golden Body successfully, my body has achieved the level of an eternal real god. Jian Wushuang was delighted and excited. Previously, his body was only at the level of a real god. At that very moment, it had achieved the level of an eternal real god. Visit on our novel full. The great improvement of the body meant that Jian Wushuang's defense would be stronger and his ability to keep himself alive would be greater. 4 secret skills. I have already honed the secret skills that I have learned to the highest level that they can achieve at my current stage. Next, the things that I can still improve are my unique skills and comprehension of the Heaven Way. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed brilliantly. After that, he closed his eyes and started his comprehension with great concentration. Jian Wushuang's understanding toward sword principles was so high that it was shocking. However, he was restricted by his realm previously. At that very moment, his realm had made a breakthrough and he could display all his understanding of the sword principles. In the Burning Demon region, he had merely comprehended peacefully for 15 years and managed to create a primary stage 2 real god unique skill. However, Jian Wushuang knew that the primary stage 2 real god unique skill was not his best. His sword principles were still in the eruption stage and it was the same for his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine. At that very moment, he had completely emptied his mind and immersed himself into his training. He was very certain that currently the most important thing was to train. At the very least, he had to train until the eruption stage came to an end. Once the eruption stage was over, the growth of his abilities would slow down. At that time, learning things through experience and looking for opportunities would be the most suitable way for him to continue improving himself. With training, Jian Wushuang's sword principles, as well as his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine, improved continuously. In the blink of an eye, another 300 years had passed. Jian Wushuang. A message was sent and Jian Wushuang, who was in the midst of his training, woke up with a start. Hall Master Yuan, what's wrong? Jian Wushuang questioned. Today there will be a banquet at my place and the deacons of the lineage of Star staying at the Milky Way will have to attend it. You should come as well, Hall Master Yuan said. A banquet? For what purpose are we holding the banquet such that even all the deacons have to attend? Although Jian Wushuang had doubts, he still moved his body straight away. In no time Jian Wushuang arrived at the location of the banquet. It was a very large-scale banquet. Within the lineage of Star, there were currently more than 40 deacons staying at the endless Milky Way and all of them were present for the banquet. Jian Wushuang was also with them. After arriving at the banquet, Jian Wushuang could tell immediately that the star of the banquet was Lei Chao. Among the real gods of the lineage of Star, Lei Chao was the only one who made it into the real god ranking list. Hence, he could be said to be the number one of the real gods within the lineage of Star. Also, before Jian Wushuang had come to the lineage of Star, Lei Chao had been traveling in an extremely special place that was filled with danger. For the past few years, Lei Chao had returned to the lineage of Star to take a rest for a period of time. However, at that very moment he was about to leave again. Thus, the banquet was held intentionally to send Lei Chao off. Lei Chao is an expert of the real god ranking list and his abilities are extremely close to those of an almighty. However, he still needs to travel with caution in that place. Moreover, it is also said that he might lose his life at any moment. If I'm not wrong, he should be traveling to one of the 8 layers. The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's head. The 8 layers. Jian Wushuang's expression changed. That is one of the most dangerous places of the eternal chaotic world. In addition, there are also many things over there. However, your abilities now are still very weak and you do not have the qualifications to go there, the king of venomous worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Although he possessed the fighting capabilities of an eternal real god at that very moment, he was still not at the top of the eternal chaotic world. Therefore he did not know and was also not qualified to know any of the secrets of the eternal chaotic world. The banquet was unusually lively. Suddenly, a deacon who had achieved the level of a chaotic real god questioned, "Lei Chao, which lair are you planning to go to this time round?" "The sixth lair," Lei Chao answered immediately. After hearing that, a small number of deacons who knew something about the sixth lair opened their eyes wide. Chapter 1592 Helpless. Chapter 1592, Helpless. Sixth lair? King of Venomous Worms was shocked too. The 8 lairs, the stronger they are the more dangerous it is. Many strong chaotic real god only dare to venture into 8 lair. As for the 6th lair, it is dangerous even for experts on real god ranking list. Lei Chao has guts. Jian Wuxuang squinted his eyes. He could tell that Lei Chao's trip was very dangerous. Many higher-ups on Lineage of Star definitely knew. Hence the banquet to send him off. "Come on everyone. Let's toast to Lei Chao." Hall Master Yuan raised his glass as his voice traveled across the hall. The higher-ups of Lineage of Star at the banquet naturally raised their glasses and Jian Wuxuang did the same. Lei Chao departed right after the banquet. Lineage of Star resumed its tranquility again while Jian Wuxuang returned to his secret room to continue his cultivation. In the blink of an eye, another 200 years passed. In the secret room, Jian Wuxuang slowly opened his eyes. Regardless of if it was enhancement of sword principle or speed of comprehension towards Heaven Way, it obviously slowed down significantly. It seems that the eruption period after I break through and become Universe God in the third heaven has passed, Jian Wuxuang muttered to himself, but there was a smile on his face. An ordinary cultivator would be welcomed with a short eruption period after they broke through and entered another realm. Jian Wuxuang was an inverse cultivator, so he was trapped in the realm of Universe God in the second heaven for a long time. Then, as he broke through, the eruption period was naturally much longer. It lasted for a total of 500 years. In the 500 years, Jian Wuxuang didn't spend his time in vain. After painstaking cultivation, regardless of sword unique kill or comprehension towards Heaven Way, there was a major improvement. His power was naturally much stronger than when he was in Burning Demon region. Once the eruption period is over, it will be useless to continue to cultivate in seclusion. Jian Wuxuang immediately left the secret room. In Sword Star, under a big tree, Jian Wuxuang, Ling Feibai, Longya and Xian Yi sat together. "Xian Yi, congratulations for breaking through and becoming a real god. Among the 4 of us, you're the first who broke through and became a real god," Jian Wuxuang said to Xian Yi. Ling Feibai and Longya by his side looked envious too, especially Longya. He stopped at the realm of Universe God much longer than Xian Yi. But then, Xian Yi had already broken through and he had yet to break through. Xian Yi looked at Jian Wuxuang with a weird look and said, "Although I broke through and became a real god in terms of power, I am far behind a peak void real god. I can't compare to you and Duan Lingfeng at all." "You want to compare with the 2 monsters?" Ling Feibai rolled his eyes at Xian Yi. Regardless of if it was Jian Wuxuang or Duan Lingfeng, they were both widely recognized as monstrous monsters that were hard to come by in eternal chaotic world. Like Jian Wuxuang, he was only a universe god, but his fighting power could be evenly matched with an eternal real god. When Duan Lingfeng broke through and became real god, he could defeat an eternal chaotic real god head-on too. As for Xian Yi, although he was also a top genius, he was far behind if he were to compare to the 2 of them. Visit on our novel full. Jian Wuxuang heard Xian Yi's complaints and laughed them off. Although he was a deacon elderly then, he didn't act haughtily. He was willing to chat casually with his few peers. Just then, swoosh, swoosh, there were 2 figures that suddenly plunged in from the Milky Way and landed on Sword Star. The 4 of them under the tree looked. When they saw the incomers, Ling Feibai, Longya and Xian Yi got up simultaneously. "Jian Wuxuang, we shall make a move as you have things to deal with," Ling Feibai said. Jian Wuxuang nodded. After Ling Feibai and the other 2 left, Jian Wuxuang got up too and looked at the man and woman before him. "Elder Wu Liang, Elder Fei Yan, why are both of you so free to visit me today?" Jian Wuxuang smiled faintly. He waved and there were fresh wine and delicacies on the stone table again. "Come and have a drink together." "Drink is not necessary. We came today to ask for a favor." Elder Wu Liang smiled faintly and he sounded quite gentle. "Oh." Jian Wuxuang looked at the 2 of them in shock. From what he knew, the 2 elders before him should be considered as extremely strong among all deacon elderlies in Lineage of Star. For instance, Elder Wu Liang was a peak eternal real god. As for Elder Fei Yin, although she was weaker, she was extremely close to a peak eternal real God standard. He wasn't a match for either of them. With such power, they still needed help from him. Please do tell me what's going on, Jian Wushuang said. I'll be frank, Real God Wu Liang said. Actually, it is a task that Hall Master Yuan has delegated to me. He wants me to kill a real god. The real god's name is Real God Shi Jue. Real God Shi Jue shared a great resentment with Lineage of Star. Many years ago, there were 2 disciples of Star Palace from Lineage of Star who came across him were killed when they were wandering outside. What? Jian Wushuang was shocked. The disciples of Star Palace were the most outstanding ones in Lineage of Star. Every one of them was truly a top genius. For instance, there were many higher-ups in Lineage of Star derived from disciples of Star Palace. Lineage of Star attached great importance to the disciples of Star Palace too. However, Real God Shi Jue killed had 2 disciples of Star Palace. No wonder Lineage of Star would want to kill him. Real God Shi Jue is very cunning. He knew that he didn't have a place in 10 cultivation sanctuaries after the incident was exposed. Hence, he ran out of 10 cultivation sanctuaries long ago and went to some holy kingdoms far away. Over hundreds of thousands of years, we of Lineage of Star couldn't find him. But not too long ago, we Lineage of Star received a piece of credible news that Real God Shi Jue returned to 10 cultivation sanctuaries and he is hiding in Colored Glaze Sanctuary. Hall Master Yuan assigned me to kill him at Colored Glaze Sanctuary. However, Real God Shi Jue is a strong eternal real god after all. Plus, his defensive power is extremely strong. Most importantly, his speed is extremely fast and his martial art motion is impressive too. With me alone, it is almost impossible to kill him. So I found you in Elder Fei Yin. Elder Fei Yin was good at entangling and trapped his opponent while you, Jian Wushuang, have a terrifying martial art motion. You might be even faster by a slight bit than Real God Shi Jue. Only collaboration with the 2 of you will give me the confidence to kill Real God Shi Jue. Of course, the reward for the task is bountiful. By then we can split evenly, Elder Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang, what do you think? Elder Fei Yin looked at him too. Real God Shi Jue is on which land in Colored Glaze Sanctuary? It shouldn't be in 4-symbol land, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Don't worry. It's not in 4-symbol land. If it was on 4-symbol land, I wouldn't come to look for you, Elder Wu Liang laughed. He knew the resentment between Jian Wushuang and the overlord of 4-symbol land, 4-symbol mansion. If Jian Wushuang were to head to 4-symbol land, he would be courting death himself. If so, all right then, Jian Wushuang agreed straight away. Chapter 1593 Soaring Heaven King Palace. Chapter 1593 Soaring Heaven King Palace. Inside a normal town of the Soaring Heaven land within the Colored Glaze Sanctuary. The Lineage of Star has gotten information that Real God Shi Jue is most likely in this town now. Elder Wu Liang was looking at the town in front of him. However, this town is very big and there are also many cultivators. If Real God Shi Jue were to hide his own presence intentionally, it would be quite troublesome for us to find him. Leave it to me, Jian Wushuang spoke. An eternal real god is very easy to find. Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yin glanced at Jian Wushuang and laughed immediately. Both of them knew that Jian Wushuang was an inverse cultivator. Moreover, the consciousness of an inverse cultivator would have evolved to soul power a long time ago. Hence, no matter how Real God Shi Jue concealed himself, it would still be impossible for him to escape Jian Wushuang's soul search. Jian Wushuang started to search within the town at once. His soul power was at a very high level. Thus, if he were to conduct a search, he would be able to find anyone as long as it were not an almighty or those chaotic real gods who stood at the top and had also managed to unlock a small bit of soul fire. I have found him. Jian Wushuang stopped in front of the void of a pub. As for Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yin, they were still outside the town as they were afraid of alerting Real God Shi Jue inadvertently. After all, Jian Wushuang was only a universe god. Even if Real God Shi Jue were to see him, he would not be too concerned. However, if Real God Shi Jue were to discover that there were 2 additional eternal real gods within the detection range of his consciousness, he would definitely put his guard up straight away. This is a bit strange. There is actually a total of 3 eternal real gods in this city. Moreover, the 3 eternal gods are together. Jian Wushuang was communicating with Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yin. 3 eternal real gods. Jian Wushuang, is Real God Shi Jue one of the 3 eternal real gods? Elder Wu Liang questioned. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. As for the other 2, one of them has white hair and he looks like a young man. Moreover, He has a seal of white flames between his eyebrows. Jian Wuxuang could tell the main characteristics of the three eternal real gods in the pub via his soul power. If I'm not wrong, those two people should be real god Danding and real god Ming Xian of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Moreover, they are both peak eternal real gods, Elder Wu Liang said. Soaring Heaven King Palace? Jian Wuxuang was shocked. The Soaring Heaven King Palace was the overlord of the Soaring Heaven land. Moreover, they were known for their power and influence in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Looking at their reputations and abilities as a whole, they were slightly better than the lineage of Star in both aspects. Thus, they were definitely a first-rate big powerhouse. It was said that both of the two palace masters were on equal footing with the founder of the lineage of Star. Why would the experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace be with real God Shi Jue? Elder Wu Liang frowned. This is going to be troublesome. Jian Wuxuang, don't do anything for now. Just stay there and observe the situation. Elder Wu Liang sent a message over. Understood, Jian Wuxuang nodded his head. Inside a private room of the pub was the three eternal real gods. The private room was covered with a seal that could isolate space and time. Although Jian Wuxuang's soul power could detect the existence of the three of them, he was unable to hear their conversation. In the private room, three shadows were sitting together. Real God Shi Jue, Ming Xian and I have gotten a message saying that you possess that item. Therefore we hurried over here. I hope that you will not make this a wasted trip for us. The voice of real God Danding, who looked like a young man, was cold and he was looking at the long-haired, gloomy man opposite him. The gloomy man was real God Shi Jue. Shi Jue, show us that item, real God Ming Xian said. Real God Shi Jue did not hesitate and took out an item. After seeing the item that real God Shi Jue had taken out, real God Danding and real God Ming Xian's eyes brightened up. In the void outside the pub, Jian Wuxuang also saw the item that real God Shi Jue had taken out with his soul power. What's that? Jian Wuxuang revealed a puzzled expression. He could tell that the item that real God Shi Jue had taken out was an extremely special token. Real God Shi Jue, you have been chased down by the lineage of Star so miserably and you can only hide in a remote holy kingdom. Even so, you were still able to get this item? Real God Danding looked at real God Shi Jue with interest. I was just fortunate. Real God Shi Jue laughed evilly and put the token back into his Chen Kuan ring. Shi Jue, let me say this bluntly, real God Ming Xian spoke, this item of yours is very precious. However, if you wish to use this item alone to get the Soaring Heaven King Palace to take action and resolve the feud between you and the lineage of Star so that the lineage of Star will stop going after you, that's absolutely impossible. With the lineage of Star's abilities, unless an emperor-level existence appears personally, no one can get the lineage of Star to give up on hunting you down. I am clear about this, real God Shi Jue said. I dare not hope that the lineage of Star will give up on hunting me down. Today, I brought this item to find the both of you as I hoped that the Soaring Heaven King Palace behind the both of you would recommend me to join the Sanctuary Alliance. In addition, to let me go to the Thunderbolt Island to train for a period of time if possible. Join the Sanctuary Alliance? Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian looked at each other. Real God Danding then laughed. Joining the Sanctuary Alliance would be easy as you are more than good enough with your abilities. Moreover, it is an easy task for the Soaring Heaven King Palace to recommend you. As for the Thunderbolt Island, it's not difficult either. Thus, the Soaring Heaven King Palace has no problem with accepting your conditions. It's a deal then. As for this item, both of you can set your minds at ease. As long as this matter is settled, I will pass it to both of you immediately, real God Shi Jue said. Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian laughed. We have confidence in you. Since you have provoked the lineage of Star and been forced to such a tragic state, I believe that you are not gutsy enough to provoke the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Definitely, real God Shi Jue smiled obsequiously. Ming Xian and I will take care of this matter for you now. Within 10 days this matter will be taken care of. For that period of time, please wait here. Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian stood up. Thank you and sorry for troubling the both of you. Real God Shi Jue was extremely modest. Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian then walked out of the pub. After leaving the pub, both real God Danding and real God Ming Xian used their consciousnesses to scan the surrounding area. They then left after that, leaving behind real God Shi Jue to wait inside the private room of the pub. Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yen, the two eternal real gods of the Soaring Heaven King Palace have left, Jian Wuxuang messaged. All right. Let's be patient. Those two eternal real gods just left not long ago and they should still be within this town. Just in case, we shall wait until they leave this town and get far away. We will take action at that time, Elder Wu Liang said. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and his soul power covered the pub completely. With that, each and every action of real God Shi Jue in the pub would be under his watch. Chapter 1594 Real God Shi Jue. Chapter 1594 Real God Shi Jue. Half a day later. Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xian should have left. We can take action now, Elder Wu Liang sent a message. I shall greet Real God Shi Jue at the bar first. The two of you hurry over then, Jian Wushuang replied. All right, Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yan nodded as they plunged over quickly from outside of the town. Jian Wushuang moved into the bar. In the bar, there was a prohibition that covered the private room which Real God Shi Jue was in. Any ordinary probing wouldn't notice his existence. Naturally, he wasn't worried that anyone could find him. After all, not everyone was like Jian Wushuang. He had soul power. I, Shi Jue, was forced into a corner by lineage of star. I had no choice but to hide in the Holy Kingdom far away from 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Fortunately, God pitted me and gave me a chance to turn things around. As long as I can become a member in Alliance Sanctuary and cultivate on Thunderbolt Island, even lineage of star will face various limitations. At least in many places, they can't kill me openly and I will get aid from some resources on Thunderbolt Island to increase my power. One day when my power increases tremendously and I become the top chaotic real god like Real God Jiogong who is an expert on real god ranking list, lineage of star wouldn't be able to do anything to me. Real God Shi Jue clenched his fists tight. In eternal chaotic world, there were some top experts who had offended large power forces but still lived well. Just like Real God Jiogong from Jiogong Holy Kingdom, he was a classic example. He fought lineage of star ferociously. He dared not enter lineage of star's territory but the experts from lineage of star didn't dare to enter his holy kingdom either. Regardless of the person, he wouldn't hesitate to kill whoever entered. Lineage of star could do nothing about it either. After all, Real God Jiogong was a superb existence on the 5th place on Real God ranking list. In terms of fighting power, he could be compared favorably with an almighty. Real God Shi Jue wanted to become the second Real God Jiogong. This is my only chance to flip over. I must seize the chance. Real God Shi Jue cleaned his hand and thought but his face suddenly changed. He noticed that someone had ignored the surrounding prohibition and walked through it. Huh. There's someone in the private room? I thought there was no one. A universe god carrying a sword on his back appeared before Real God Shi Jue. Real God Shi Jue squinted his eyes slightly and glanced at the universe god. Get out. Hee, don't be so hot-tempered. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and took a seat before Real God Shi Jue. He then raised a glass casually. It's boring to drink alone. Why not let me keep you company, Real God Shi Jue? At first, Real God thought Jian Wushuang was an idiot that barged into the private room by accident. But when Jian Wushuang called his name, Real God Shi Jue's face suddenly stiffened. Who are you? Real God Shi Jue spoke with a deep voice. In this world, one who would find you at the first instant when they found out Real God Shi Jue's whereabouts. Who do you think I am? Jian Wushuang smiled. Lineage of star. Real God Shi Jue's face grew grave. He immediately spread his consciousness power but he didn't notice any strong aura within his consciousness range that bothered him. There was only the universe god before him. Real God Shi Jue became uncertain. After all, lineage of star had finally found him. They wouldn't just send a universe god to kill him, right? Real God Shi Jue, you dare to kill the disciples of Star Palace from lineage of star and you killed 2 of them at once. You really have guts, Jian Wushuang smiled. But suddenly, Virum. A shocking sword intention instantly exploded. The entire room was immediately filled with the bolt of sword intention. Blood Mountain sword on Jian Wushuang's back was out of the scabbard. Such a swift stroke. Previously, Real God Shi Jue didn't worry about Jian Wushuang who was only a universe god. But the moment Jian Wushuang struck with his sword, his pupils contracted in shock. Wow. A sword light flashed and Real God Shi Jue had already moved to the side to dodge the stroke. Then the sword light dispersed and the room remained complete. The surrounding prohibition continued to exist and the table before Jian Wushuang only cracked when Jian Wushuang disappeared entirely. His strength control is so perfect? There was shock across Real God Shi Jue's face but then, Hong. A terrifying aura was like an awakened dragon that swept out. It was illustriously pressuring. Jian Wushuang took into consideration that it was a pub and there were many cultivators in the pub. Hence, he controlled the power of the performed sword principle to not affect the other cultivators. However, real God Shi Jue obviously didn't care much. His aura as an eternal real god was extremely fierce. He shattered the entree pub like breaking a piece of dead wood. The cultivators in the pub plunged out simultaneously and ran far away. Jian Wushuang and real God Shi Jue appeared in the void. But the moment they appeared, real God Shi Jue immediately noticed two fierce auras plunging over from the surroundings. These two are real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yen from lineage of Star. Damn it. Real God Shi Jue's face changed. Shi Jue, you can't escape. Real God Wu Liang's face was cold and his robe fluttered. He had another black sword that appeared in his hand. Today you have to die. Real God Fei Yen had rage soaring into the sky too. After he spoke, rumble. A flush of green torrents flowed out like a raging tsunami. It swept out and covered the heaven and earth. Suddenly the void surrounding real God Shi Jue was covered. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Among the green torrents, there was a huge green hand and there were waves that stirred the space. They pressed towards real God Shi Jue together. There was a dim light on real God Shi Jue's body. Then there was a black exotic beast that soared up from his body and his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. As his aura churned, it turned into ghosts that twinkled in the void. It shuttled to and fro and dodged the huge green hands and green waves that billowed against him at ease. At the same time, his body wanted to rush over from the besiegement of the three of them. Real God Shi Jue's martial art motion is really impressive. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and the power of spacetime suddenly rippled outwards. Jian Wushuang moved. A total of almost 100 shadows were cast at the same time. With the aid of the power of spacetime, Jian Wushuang's 100 shadows were like fish that were frightened and shuttling around in the water. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang appeared next to real God Shi Jue. This universe god is really fast and his martial art motion is so creepy. Real God Shi Jue saw Jian Wushuang's arrival and there was shock in his eyes. Then he saw Jian Wushuang wield his sword. Chapter 1595, An Unforeseen Situation. Chapter 1595, An Unforeseen Situation. Back then when they were in the pub, Jian Wushuang was worried that his sword principles would affect other people. Hence, he unleashed them with concern. However, at that moment, reincarnation of the highest heaven. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed with a shrill light. The whole universe turned completely dark and a frightening sword essence rushed beyond the highest heavens. Real God Shi Jue was right in front of Jian Wushuang. Hence, he could feel Jian Wushuang's attack clearly. He could feel that the frightening sword essence was heading toward him from all directions. It was as if he had been locked onto by 100 million sword shadows at the same time and there was no way for him to escape. This is a Stage 2 Real God unique skill? Real God Shi Jue revealed a shocked expression. He did not expect the universe god to actually unleash a Stage 2 Real God unique skill which could only be created by an eternal real god. Piss off. Real God Shi Jue was extremely furious and he changed into a strange exotic beast instantly. His body stretched and his 5 fingers came together to form a sharp claw with lightning speed. The sharp claw then changed into a silver, glittering light that looked as though it could tear the universe apart. Bam! With a loud sound, Jian Wushuang and real God Shi Jue's bodies were forced to retreat a few steps due to the impact. How can this be? Real God Shi Jue raised his head fearfully. Although Jian Wushuang had used a Stage 2 Real God unique skill, he was ultimately still a universe god. Even though real God Shi Jue had fought against him seriously, he was actually evenly matched with Jian Wushuang. Shi Jue die. A loud, fierce roar could be heard from above real God Shi Jue. Not good. Real God Shi Jue's expression changed greatly. However, real God Wu Liang had already appeared above him and at the same time, the black épée on his hands was swung downward. It was just like a giant black cloud. All of a sudden the enormous black cloud, which contained an earth-shaking power, descended. Moreover, at the area near real God Shi Jue, 2 green giant hands had caught his body and he was unable to unleash his martial art motion. Real God Shi Jue struggled with all his might and shook off the green giant hands. When the black cloud descended upon him, he swung his sharp claws around again. His claws, which could tear open the universe, had only torn apart a very small portion of the black cloud and the black cloud continued to cover his body. Puff. Real God Shi Jue spat out a mouthful of blood straight away and his body fell toward the ground. Bam! Real God Shi Jue crashed into a black tower, creating a giant hole. However, in just a short moment, with a boom sound, the black tower was completely broken into pieces and Real God Shi Jue's body flew up again. At that moment, his expression was pale and there was also some blood at the corners of his mouth. This caused him to look extremely miserable. However, at that moment he was sending a message like his life depended on it. Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xen, come and save me quickly. The lineage of Star has come for me and I am unable to stop them. If I die, that item will land in the hands of the lineage of Star. Real God Shi Jue was extremely anxious. Swish! A ghost-like body appeared in front of him again and at the same time hundreds of sword lights headed toward him abruptly. Damn it! Real God Shi Jue had a very unpleasant expression. He could tell that the lineage of Star had made ample preparations to kill him this time around. For the three of them who had besieged him, each of them had their own abilities. In particular, Real God Wu Liang's attack power was exceptionally high and one stroke was enough to wound him fatally. Thus, Real God Wu Liang possessed the ability to kill him. As for the two other people, they were working with Real God Wu Liang harmoniously. For example, Real God Fei Yan was controlling the green and mighty current to restrict him continuously so that he would be unable to escape. As for the Universe God, who was using a sword in front of him, even though he looked like a Universe God, his abilities were also impressive. The most important thing was his martial art motion, which was actually not inferior to his own. It should be known that Real God Fei Yan was most proficient in martial art motion. With such a level of martial art motion, even if Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan were to team up, he could use his own martial art motion to deal with them. Moreover, he could deal with them for a very long period of time or even find an opportunity to escape. However, at that moment, the Universe God could actually match him in martial art motion. Moreover, the Universe God could fight with him time after time and then create an opening for Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan to kill him. With these three experts working together, it will be impossible for me to escape. Unless Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xang get here in time, I will definitely die. Real God Shi Jue was very clear about that. Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xan would most likely come to his rescue and there was still a shard of hope for him. However, if he were to be besieged by the three of them somewhere else, he would give up all hope and stop resisting. Boom, boom, bam. At the void, Jianghu Xuan, Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan had teamed up and they were attacking Real God Shi Jue crazily from all directions. Real God Shi Jue was completely suppressed and he could not counterattack at all. However, Real God Shi Jue was ultimately an expert at the level of an eternal Real God and his ability to keep himself alive was strong. After clashing many times, even though the injuries on his body had gotten worse continuously, he was still not killed. However, at that moment, Jianghu Xuan's expression changed abruptly. Not good. Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xan have come, Jianghu Xuan shouted. What? Real God Wu Liang's expression could not help but change. How are they so fast? Didn't they leave this town already? Even if they were to receive Real God Shi Jue's message for help straight away, they would definitely need about half a day's time to return here, Real God Fei Yan said with surprise. There's one possibility. The Soaring Heaven King Palace might have planted a secret wormhole within this town. By going through the wormhole, Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xan would be transported here right away, Jianghu Xuan said. Transportation via a wormhole would naturally be faster than flying over. The Soaring Heaven King Palace was the overlord of this piece of land. Thus, it was highly possible that they had planted a secret wormhole within the town. However, transportation via a wormhole was not easy, especially for long-distance transportation. Hence, if the experts were not in a rush, they would rather travel by themselves. At that moment, Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xan, who were thought to have gone far away, had appeared on the battlefield abruptly. As such, this brought about an unforeseen situation for Jianghu Xuan and the two elders. As for Real God Shi Jue, who was seriously injured and was about to reach his limit, he was delighted when he saw the arrival of Real God Dan Ding and Real God Ming Xan. Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan of the lineage of Star. As for the other person, if my guess is not wrong, you are the inverse cultivator Jianghu Xuan who is famous in the eternal chaotic world, right? A hearty laugh could be heard from the void not too far away. Two blurry shadows then appeared in the void. An inverse cultivator? Real God Shi Jue could not help but glance at Jianghu Xuan. Previously, he had been hiding in the holy kingdoms that were extremely far away from the 10 cultivation sanctuaries all the while, and it was only until recently that he returned. Hence, he had never heard of Jian Wushuang. However, after hearing what real God Danding had said at that moment, he understood. No wonder his abilities are so impressive. It's because he's an inverse cultivator. Chapter 1596, Hunt. Chapter 1596, Hunt. In an instant, real God Danding and real God Ming Xian appeared on the battlefield. Lineage of Star, stop this instant. Real God Danding's voice contained a strange power and it reverberated in the void. Elder Wu Liang, what do we do? Both Jian Wushuang and real God Fei Yan looked. Real God Wu Liang's gaze was cold. He stole a glance at real God Shi Jue. Don't worry about them. Continue to kill. Hong. The three of them launched an attack again. Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian's face changed. It's Soaring Heaven Land after all. Please give Soaring Heaven King Palace face. Real God Danding spoke but his voice became cold. Humph, the three of us already did. Otherwise we won't wait till the two of you leave before we took action. Real God Wu Liang scoffed. It seems that the three of you really want to have a hard time with Soaring Heaven King Palace. Real God Danding's aura soared. It's Soaring Heaven King Palace that is making it difficult for Lineage Star. You knew real God Shi Jue shared a great resentment with Lineage of Star but you kept him under your provision. Real God Wu Liang roared. If so, there's nothing for us to say. Ming Xian, let's do this. Real God Danding waved his sleeve and barged into the battlefield along with real God Ming Xian next to him. Real God Danding and real God Ming Xian were both peak eternal real gods. Once the two of them got involved, the entire battle immediately took a drastic turn. Haha, real God Wu Liang, I heard about you long ago but I never fought with you before. I'd like to contest with you today. Real God Danding blocked before real God Wu Liang. He knew for sure that real God Wu Liang was the one with the scariest power among the three of them. As long as he kept him busy, the remaining real God Fei Yan and Jian Wushuang wouldn't be able to pose as great of a threat to real God Shi Jue. You wouldn't be able to stop me if you were to fight against me head-on. Real God Wu Liang was ferocious as he turned into a primeval beast. On the other hand, real God Ming Xian, please keep real God Fei Yan and Jian Wushuang busy. Real God Shi Jue roared and he had already launched his fastest speed with the intention to run away from the battlefield. Let me take care of them. Real God Ming Xian gripped his two long spears in his hands. Along with the flowing divine power, the two long spears stabbed into the air simultaneously. The two long spears weren't aimed at anyone, but when they flew out, there was immediately a wormhole in the void above. The two long spears flew into the wormhole then appeared before Jian Wushuang and real God Fei Yan in the very next moment. This? Jian Wushuang was shocked. He could tell that real God Ming Xian's manipulation of power of spacetime was very impressive. If not mistaken, his comprehension towards spacetime doctrine should be at the standard to pass through the third level of Doctrine Palace. The long spears contained terrifying power. As it flew, real God Fei Yan's face changed. She waved and there were immediately billowing waves that blocked her. The long spear pierced through the waves but in the end, it couldn't withstand the waves. As for Jian Wushuang, he cast almost 100 shadows and used the power of spacetime to shuttle to and fro. He dodged the long spear with ease. Real God Ming Xian looked at Jian Wushuang with astonishment. Jian Wushuang's martial art motion is impressive. He comprehended spacetime doctrine too and it isn't a low comprehension. With the existence of such a martial art motion, even if I only fight against him alone, I might not be able to stop him. Let alone if I'm fighting against two, it's impossible. Shi Jue, I can only stop real God Fei Yan. As for Jian Wushuang, it's your call. Real God Shi Jue, who already escaped from the green torrents pressed by real God Fei Yan, naturally saw the scene behind him. At the same time, he saw that Jian Wushuang was already chasing after him. His pupil fixed and then he smirked coldly. Although Jian Wushuang is impressive, he is a universe god after all. His fighting power is limited. With him alone, even if he catches up, he can't do anything to me. With such a thought, real God Shi Jue launched his fastest speed to plunge towards the void out of the city. Jian Wushuang followed closely behind. In the city, real God Wu Liang and real God Wu Yan were fighting against real God Danding and real God Ming Xian. In terms of power, real God Wu Liang was slightly stronger than real God Danding by a slight bit while real God Ming Xian was stronger than real God Fei Yan. However, real God Fei Yan's defense power was strong. The collaborations of both, they were just evenly matched. The match would be too hard to call in a short period of time. The four of them could launch a calling act. Haha, you live up to your reputation, real God Wu Liang. You are really powerful. However, the monster from lineage of star Jian Wushuang is only a universe god after all. You want him to go after real God Shi Jue, is it really okay? Real God Dan Ding sneered at him. Real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yan's faces grew distressed. The two of them had already sent a message to Jian Wushuang for him to be careful. If he couldn't, he should give up hunting real God Shi Jue. But Jian Wushuang's reply was to let him take care of it. He seemed to be very confident. Real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yan had no choice about it. Swoosh, swoosh. There were two rays of flowing light traveling at shocking speed. In an instant the two of them were out of the city. In the vast void, real God Shi Jue still looked pale even though he consumed a few elixirs on the way. His injuries during the earlier besiegement couldn't be recovered so easily, and the injury would affect his fighting power. Jian Wushuang is really chasing after me alone? He has guts. Real God Shi Jue stole a glance at Jian Wushuang, who was chasing closely behind. He really thought I'd be afraid of him, a universe god. There was a chilly gleam twinkling in real God Shi Jue's eyes. Among the three from lineage of star that hemmed him in, he was afraid of real God Wu Lian the most. After all, he was an expert standing on the pearl among eternal real gods long ago. He was extremely close to chaotic real god too. During the besiegement earlier, the reason why he had been heavily injured was because of real God Wu Liang. Besides real God Wu Liang, he didn't even bother about real God Fei Yan, who was extremely close to the level of peak eternal real god, let alone Jian Wushuang. From his viewpoint, among the three that besieged him, Jian Wushuang was the one who posed the least threat. He could only be his match in terms of martial art motion. As you want to follow me then. We just left the city not long ago. You don't have to rush things. After a while, when we are far away enough from where real God Wu Liang was, I'll take action to kill the most impressive genius in the history of lineage of star. After all, I already killed 2 disciples of Star Palace in the past. The hatred that lineage of star harbored against me is never-ending. It's nothing to kill another one. Real God Shi Jue had terrifying murderous intention rising in his heart. Chapter 1597, 1 against 1. Chapter 1597, 1 against 1. 2 shadows, one in front and one behind, were moving quickly. During the journey, the distance between the both of them was well maintained. It neither closed up nor pulled further apart. Just like that, the chase went on for close to an hour. In a vast wasteland, real God Shi Jue, who had been running away, finally stopped. Finally stopped running? Jian Wushuang's body stopped in the void. He wore an indifferent smile and was looking at real God Shi Jue, who was in front of him. He could tell a long time ago that real God Shi Jue was not running away with his full power. Thus, it was obvious that he was baiting Jian Wushuang intentionally so that he could find an opportunity to kill Jian Wushuang later on. However, didn't Jian Wushuang have the same thought as well? Real God Shi Jue. Although you have not achieved the peak of an eternal real god, you are very close to it. Thus, such an eternal god is a lot stronger than real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu, who I have fought in the Burning Demon region back then, and it would also be quite a challenge for the current me. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Although real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu were eternal real gods, their abilities were normal and they were considered early-stage eternal real gods, which belonged to the lowest level of the eternal real god. As for real God Shi Jue, he was considered quite high level among the eternal real gods, where he was very close to the peak level. Even though he was fatally injured at that very moment and his abilities were affected to a certain extent, his fighting capabilities could not be compared to eternal real gods at the level of real God Shi Jue and real God Shui Wu in the slightest. If it were 500 years ago, Jian Wushuang would not be daring enough to hunt real God Shi Jue down by himself. However, it was different at that very moment. After training for 500 years at the eruption stage, his abilities had risen considerably and the current him had the confidence to fight with real God Shi Jue. Jian Wushuang, the #1 demon in the history of the lineage of star. Back then, I merely killed 2 Star Palace disciples. With that, I made the lineage of star extremely furious and they hunted me down like crazy. Today, if I were to kill you, the #1 demon, I wonder what the lineage of star would do? Real God Shi Jue grinned. At the same time, he was very sure of his own condition. Currently, I should be able to unleash 70% of my fighting capabilities. Although it's only 70%, it will be more than enough to kill him. Die. Real God Shi Jue's eyes turned cold and his body changed into a hideous exotic beast with its body filled with golden scales at once. He then attacked with lightning speed immediately. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Real God Shi Jue's body moved quickly and remnants of his shadow were left behind on the void. His speed was extremely fast. For early-stage eternal real gods like Real God Shi Jue and Real God Shui Wu, it would probably be difficult for them to see his path. However, Jian Wushuang was able to see it clearly. He's here. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned serious. The hideous exotic beast, its body filled with golden scales, had already appeared in front of him. At the same time, it jumped high up into the air and it swung the sharp claws on its paws down with lightning speed. A ray of golden light. Icy cold and dazzling. It ripped the air open and generated an ear-piercing noise. When the golden light appeared, it was only one ray of golden light. However, it changed to tens of rays of golden light abruptly. Every ray of golden light contained a shocking amount of power. Over here. Jian Wushuang locked on to one ray of the golden light instantly and the blood mountain sword in his hands attacked like a spiritual snake straight away. The sword light collided with the golden light and its frightening power squeezed the void. With a swish sound, a space crack that spanned hundreds of miles appeared. Golden light also appeared on Jian Wushuang's body at once and it changed into a giant golden divine ape. The golden divine ape wore golden armor as well as a helmet and its hands were holding a golden longsword tightly. At the same time, a great amount of crimson flames appeared and changed the surrounding area into a sea of fire with Jian Wushuang as its emperor. By using the golden divine ape and scarlet kingdom at the same time, Jian Wushuang had unleashed his full abilities. As for the hideous golden exotic beast that Real God Shi Jue had transformed into, with a strange change, one meta beast abruptly became two. Although the two golden exotic beasts were exactly the same, one of them was weak while the other one was strong in terms of power. The two golden exotic beasts then jumped high up into the sky at the same time. After that, they appeared beside Jian Wushuang, one on the left and the other one on the right. Swish, swish. Two dazzling rays of golden light burst forth at the same time. Blood shadow slaughter. The two golden exotic beasts were emitting an enormous amount of murderous intent and the two rays of golden light headed toward Jian Wushuang's head with lightning speed. The two rays of golden light were like two golden awls and they contained a shocking amount of power. Even if it were Jian Wushuang, he could not help but be terrified. It was clear that if any of the two rays of light were to hit his head, he would definitely be killed. Roar. The golden divine ape which shrouded Jian Wushuang's body roared furiously and the golden long sword in its hands struck the golden exotic beast with the stronger aura angrily. At the same time, a demonic dragon, which was filled with murderous intent, appeared and bit the golden exotic beast at the other side. Bam! Bam! Both of their attacks clashed. Within the golden exotic beast with the stronger aura, with a glow of shrill light in Real God Shi Jue's eyes, the golden exotic beast swung its long tail. Bang! The tail passed through the golden divine ape directly and struck Jian Wushuang's body. Jian Wushuang only felt that the distance between them was widening as his body was sent flying immediately. After regaining his posture, some blood flowed out of the corners of his mouth. As expected of the Real God Shi Jue. Even though he is seriously injured, his fighting capabilities are still so strong, Jian Wushuang said and he gasped in admiration. For an eternal real god who was near the peak level, even though it was only 70% of his fighting capabilities, he was still exceptionally strong. Even though you are merely a universe god, your defense is actually so strong? Real God Shi Jue frowned. He had originally thought that only Jian Wushuang's fighting capabilities were strong, so that they were not inferior to that of an eternal reed god. However, he did not expect Jian Wushuang's defense to be so impressive as well. As for the golden exotic beast that he had transformed into, a swing of its tail with its full power was enough to kill a void real god easily. However, when it struck Jian Wushuang, it caused him to be barely injured. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang's defense was not weaker than a normal eternal real god's. Real God Shi Jue, you shall take one stroke of mine as well. Jian Wushuang spoke apathetically and he had already raised the long sword in his hands high up into the air. Real God Shi Jue's eyes shrank. At the moment when Jian Wushuang raised his long sword, Real God Shi Jue realized that the universe across the area seemed to have already started to head toward him. Boom! A giant sword shadow appeared out of thin air in the void. It was extremely huge and the amount of power it contained was enough to make early-stage eternal real gods fearful. However, it was merely the beginning of the sword shadow. Buzz buzz? After the first sword shadow appeared, more sword shadows were formed repeatedly at the void to one side. Many towering sword shadows were floating in the void. Looking at it, there was a total of 10 sword shadows. At the next instant, the 10 towering sword shadows fused together completely. Chapter 1598 Kill. Chapter 1598 Kill. The 10 sword shadows, every single one equaled a full hit of a beginner eternal real god. Just then, the 10 sword shadows fused into one completely. The brand new sword shadow contained an outrageous power. Even real God Shi Jue couldn't help but crease his eyebrows under the sword shadow. I comprehended for 500 years with full concentration and created this strongest stroke. This stroke is made from 10 sword principles. Hence, its name is 10 waves. Go! Jianghu Xuan ambled and waved the sword in his hand. In the void at the top, the sword shadow that was fused together by 10 sword shadows descended. The entire heaven and earth pressed down. Under the pressure, real God Shi Jue realized that he wouldn't be able to dodge the sword shadow regardless. He could only opt for fighting head-on. Sky-breaking claw. Real God Shi Jue roared, and the golden, ferocious exotic beast that he substantiated suddenly shimmered with gold as boundless divine power concentrated in its claw. Then he took a huge stride and swung his sharp claw that gathered endless power. There was a golden crack in the sky. It was as though the claw split heaven and earth apart. Then the two bolts of terrifying attack collided. Bang! A tremendous noise shook the earth. The sword shadows that filled the sky shot out in all directions in madness, and it left huge space cracks in the void. Jianghu Xuan looked and took 3 steps back. As for real God Shi Jue, the golden, ferocious exotic beast that he substantiated was thrown out by the impact. As it flew off, its body continued to churn and it only regained stability after it staggered for a while. Then his face grew even paler. Bastard. It's a pity that I can only give 70% of my power to play. Otherwise, I definitely can win against you. Real God Shi Jue bellowed. Hearing real God Shi Jue's bellow, Jianghu Xuan's face grew solemn. Real God Shi Jue was right. If he were to be able to let out his peak fighting power, he really could fight against Jianghu Xuan. Jianghu Xuan also could tell that the strongest stroke that he had performed earlier, in terms of the power of sword principle, actually wasn't stronger than real God Shi Jue's sky-breaking claw. Although the stroke I performed was fierce, I think it's lacking something. Jianghu Xuan creased his eyebrows and said. 10 waves that he performed earlier were extremely strong in power. In terms of its level, it could barely reach the threshold of advanced rank 2 unique skill. However, Jianghu Xuan found the stroke far from perfect. If he could make up the flaws, his stroke would definitely be stronger or even achieve another brand new level. Jianghu Xuan, you're lucky this time. Don't come across me again next time. Otherwise, I will definitely kill you. Real God Shi Jue glared at Jianghu Xuan coldly. Then, he immediately turned into a flowing light and plunged into the void far away. You want to leave? Jianghu Xuan smirked coldly and immediately chased after in full speed. Jianghu Xuan, I can't kill you. But it's even more impossible if you want to kill me. Don't waste time. Real God Shi Jue noticed Jianghu Xuan, who trailed behind him, and he roared. Waste time? I don't think so. Jianghu Xuan's gaze was cold. Alright then. Continue to follow me if you have the guts. At most, I'll run to 4-symbol land directly. I'd like to see if the top genius and lineage of Star would dare to enter 4-symbol land, Real God Shi Jue said coldly. When he was fighting with Jianghu Xuan, he inquired Real God Wu Wang for information about Jianghu Xuan, and he knew that 4-symbol mansion harbored great resentment against Jianghu Xuan. Jianghu Xuan squinted. Real God Shi Jue reminded him that Soaring Heaven Land was right next to 4-symbol land. If he were to continue to drag on, forget about Soaring Heaven King Palace, he reckoned the experts from 4-symbol mansion would catch up too. By then he would be in big trouble. Real God Shi Jue is extremely powerful. Although he was severely injured and unable to put his peak power to play, he still isn't an easy target to kill. If I want to take care of this quickly, there's only one way. Jianghu Xuan thought, and the power of Star Palace hidden in his body was put to full play at the very next moment. The secret skill of Star Palace, he performed it straightforwardly. At the same time, there was vigor churning in Jianghu Xuan, and the divine power in him started burning in madness. The secret skill of Star Palace, the 2nd volume. Secret skill of Dragon Blood, the 2nd level. They were performed simultaneously. Jian Wushuang's speed instantly increased by 100 times. Phew. Like a gale, Jian Wushuang, who was originally 1,000 miles away, suddenly took a huge leap in an instant and came behind real God Shi Jue. Then he raised the sword in his hand. Die. There was a bellow, then a sword was swung out. What? Real God Shi Jue stared. He could feel a strong death danger from the stroke and his face instantly grew grave. He waved his sharp claw and wanted to withstand the stroke. However, due to the difference in their traveling speed, Jian Wushuang's stroke slashed real God Shi Jue without hindrance. Bang. Real God Shi Jue quivered and he didn't even manage to scream hysterically before his divine body became a cloud of blood mist. He was more than dead. Jian Wushuang continued to float there as he watched everything in silence. There was faint amazement in his eyes. The second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace increased the power that I performed by 100 times. When I slash a stroke, I reckon it is even stronger than an ordinary chaotic real god's full hit. Although real God Shi Jue is an eternal real god and his defense power is decent, and he might even have real god level armor, in the end he couldn't withstand it and died an instant death. Simple, brutal, extremely fierce. It stirred a great commotion in Jian Wushuang's heart. The secret skill of Star Palace. The strongest secret skill among the 4 secret skill in Lineage of Star was also the most famous secret skill. The secret skill was also one of the fundamental reasons why Lineage of Star was so strong. The secret skill was segregated into 3 volumes. Before Jian Wushuang break through and become a universe god in the 3rd heaven, he could only train for the first volume. When he performed it, it could increase his attack power by 10-fold and it'd last for 10 breaths. After he became universe god in the 3rd heaven, he did the 2nd volume of the secret skill of Star Palace. The 2nd volume of the secret skill of Star Palace could increase his attack power by 100-fold in an instance. It was 100 times. With Jian Wushuang's current power, his full-on sword principle could barely be compared favorably with a hit by advanced eternal real god. However, when it increased by 100 times, the power would be much stronger than many chaotic real gods' full hit. Real God Shi Jue was already severely injured, how could he withstand the hit? Hence there was the scene. Honestly speaking, I am doubtful if the secret of Star Palace was created by the founder of Lineage of Star because the secret skill is too scary. King of Venomous Worm's voice rang in Jian Wushuang's head. It is really scary, Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement. Jian Wushuang didn't feel so when he completed the 1st volume. But then, when he had completed the 2nd volume, he could see the scariness of the secret skill. However, there is a limitation to this secret skill. Such as, when performing the 2nd volume, it can only last for 1 breath, Jian Wushuang muttered. Chapter 1599 Token of the Fairy Palace's Legacy. Chapter 1599, Token of the Fairy Palace's Legacy. A breath's time was very short. With such a short amount of time, Jian Wushuang was only able to use a limited number of moves as the star power would have run out by then. If he wished to use it again, he would need a total of 800 years. Previously, for the 1st volume of the secret skill of Star Palace, Jian Wushuang had needed 10 years' time to recover before he could use it again. However, the 2nd volume was more demanding than the 1st volume. After using it, Jian Wushuang would need 800 years' time to recover the star power that had been used up completely. This move can be said to be one of my strongest trump cards. From now on, unless there is a need to, I had better not use this move, Jian Wushuang murmured. Oh right. Jian Wushuang's expression changed and with a flip of his hands, he took out an item from the Qian Kuan ring of real God Shi Jue. That item was the special token that real God Shi Jue had taken out at the pub to show real God Dan Ding and real God Ming Xen previously. The token emitted a unique aura and it also had a peculiar design. Jian Wushuang was unable to recognize what the item was. King of Venomous Worms, do you know what this token is? Jian Wushuang questioned. If I'm not wrong, this token should be the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, the King of Venomous Worms said bluntly. Token of the Fairy Palace's legacy? What's that? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. I don't need to say much about this as you can ask the experts in the Lineage of Star later on. They will definitely know of the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. Moreover, they are more knowledgeable about this than me, the King of Venomous Worms said. Understood, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. After that, he sent a message to real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yan immediately. Atop a lofty mountain, Jian Wushuang was waiting quietly in his position. After waiting for some time, real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yan hurried over. Jian Wushuang. Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan went in front of Jian Wushuang. After taking a look at him in detail, they heaved a sigh of relief. It's great that you're all right. Oh right, what happened to Real God Shi Jue? Real God Wu Liang questioned. He's dead, Jian Wushuang said. Dead? Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan were stunned. Real God Wu Liang then asked, Did you kill him? That's right, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. How is that possible? Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan found it a bit unbelievable. It must be known that Real God Shi Jue was very close to a peak eternal Real God. Moreover, his ability to stay alive was very impressive. Even if Real God Wu Liang were to have a one-to-one fight with him, he had no guarantee that he could kill him. However, Jian Wushuang had actually used his own abilities to kill him. Jian Wushuang, how did you kill him? Real God Wu Liang questioned. As for that, after muttering to himself for some time, Jian Wushuang said, To tell you the truth, I used the secret skill of Star Palace and killed him with one stroke. Even though you have used the secret skill of Star Palace to raise your attack power by 10 times, shouldn't Real God Shi Jue have been able to block it, albeit with some difficulty? Real God Wu Liang frowned. What I used was the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace, Jian Wushuang said. As soon as the words left his mouth, Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan opened their eyes wide. The second volume? Real God Wu Liang was dumbfounded. How is that possible? Real God Fei Yan had an expression which implied that he found it unbelievable. Is there a problem? Jian Wushuang asked with uncertainty. He had only said that he had used the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace. Hence, was there a need for the two deacons in front of him to be so astonished? Real God Wu Liang took a deep breath and suppressed his astonishment. He then looked at Jian Wushuang deeply and spoke. Jian Wushuang, you should also know that the secret skill of Star Palace is one of the lineage of Star's 4 secret skills. Not only is it the strongest secret skill, it is only the most reputable secret skill. Moreover, the Star Palace disciples and the deacons of the lineage of Star have all cultivated this secret skill. For example, Elder Fei Yan and I have both cultivated the secret skill of Star Palace. However, it is not so easy to cultivate this secret skill. In particular, the first volume is still manageable. As long as one works hard, they would most likely be able to cultivate it. However, many experts of the lineage of Star have stopped at the first volume as there is an extremely small possibility of cultivating the second volume. For example, Elder Fei Yan and I, as well as many deacons of the lineage of Star, have only been able to cultivate the first volume. As for the second volume within the lineage of Star, there are currently only 2 people who have successfully cultivated the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace. These 2 people are Lei Chao and Hall Master Yuan. After hearing what was said, Jian Wushuang had a puzzled expression. He finally knew why Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan were so surprised after learning that he had successfully cultivated the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace. Among the many real gods in the lineage of Star, only Lei Chao and Hall Master Yuan had successfully cultivated the second volume. At that very moment he had successfully cultivated it as well. Is the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace very difficult? Jian Wushuang frowned. He had remembered very clearly that when he was cultivating the second volume of the secret skill, he did not come across a very big bottleneck and it could be said that he had cultivated the secret skill very easily. He had originally thought that everyone else was the same as him. However, looking at it at that very moment, that was not the case. Jian Wushuang, from now on, you should be the third expert below and almighty to successfully cultivate the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace in the lineage of Star. Moreover, you are still a universe god. Real God Wu Liang and Real God Fei Yan looked at each other and their eyes were filled with envy. The secret skill of Star Palace could be said to be the trump card of many experts of the lineage of Star. Deacons like them had always yearned to cultivate the second volume. With that, when they were in a critical moment, the secret skill would be extremely useful. However, it was a pity that they had always been unable to cultivate it successfully. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that the third volume of the secret skill of Star Palace would be even more difficult? Jian Wushuang could not help but ask. Yes, it's even more difficult. Real God Wu Liang nodded his head. Since the founding of the lineage of Star until now, the Palace Master seems to be the only person who has managed to cultivate the third volume of the secret skill of Star Palace successfully. He, Jian Wushuang gasped. Elder Wu Liang and Elder Fei Yan, after I killed Real God Shi Jue, I obtained a token from his Chen Kuan ring. As this token is quite special, could the both of you help me to take a look? As Jian Wushuang spoke, he took out the token. As soon as real God Wu Liang and real God Fei Yan saw the token, their eyes became stuck to it. This is the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy? This is indeed the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. Jian Wushuang, you got this from real God Shi Jue? Real God Wu Liang looked toward Jian Wushuang at once. That's right, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Gosh, this luck of yours. I'm really envious of it, real God Wu Liang exclaimed with admiration. You have managed to cultivate the second volume of the secret skill of Star Palace successfully. Now you have obtained the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. You're really, as real God Fei Yan gasped, his eyes, which were looking at the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, were filled with excitement. However, Jian Wushuang had obtained the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy after killing real God Shi Jue. No matter how excited they were, they would not allow themselves to be taken over by greed. Chapter 1600 Sanctuary Alliance, Fairy Palace. Chapter 1600, Sanctuary Alliance, Fairy Palace. What exactly is this token of the Fairy Palace's legacy? Jian Wushuang asked. Token of the Fairy Palace's legacy is by Sanctuary Alliance. Jian Wushuang, do you know about Sanctuary Alliance? Real God Wu Liang looked at him. Jian Wushuang shook his head subconsciously. Sanctuary Alliance was actually formed by the 10 cultivation sanctuaries altogether. There are many forces among the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, including many top experts, are members of Sanctuary Alliance. Even some of the holy kingdoms outside of 10 cultivation sanctuaries could join Sanctuary Alliance once they reach the criteria. For instance, Lineage of Star, Soaring Heaven King Palace, for Symbol Mansion are all under Sanctuary Alliance, real God Wu Liang said. Jian Wushuang was astonished when he heard that. Sanctuary Alliance was formed by the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, many forces and experts? Just how strong is Sanctuary Alliance then? Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Strong? Sanctuary Alliance isn't something that could be described with the word strong. It's supreme. Real God Wu Liang said, in eternal chaotic world, Sanctuary Alliance rules. Jian Wushuang could imagine all the top experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries united with the great forces. It was naturally the most powerful force in eternal chaotic world. I'm curious, why would the great forces and experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries come together and form an alliance? Jian Wushuang was confused. This is related to some hidden secret in eternal chaotic world. I don't know much about it, but I heard that it seems to be about the 8 layers. There are some potential enemies in 8 layer and the 10 sanctuaries have to team up to fight against it, real God Wu Liang explained. Is that so? It made sense to Jian Wushuang. Under normal circumstances, the top experts and forces in 10 cultivation sanctuaries definitely wouldn't team up. However, when they shared the same enemy, that would be a different story. Sanctuary Alliance's lair is on Thunderbolt Island. There is a large number of top experts in Thunderbolt Island all year round. At the same time, there are huge opportunities and comprehension venues too. Among them, the most famous would be Fairy Palace. Real God Wu Liang continued. On Thunderbolt Island there are 13 Fairy Palaces. The 13 Fairy Palaces correspond to the 4 Supreme Doctrine and 9 Heaven God Doctrine respectively. To comprehend the doctrine accordingly in the Fairy Palace, not only would one yield twice the result with half the effort, but the result will also be far beyond your imagination. Like Real God Hall in Lineage of Star, it was built by Palace Master himself. Similarly, it helps to comprehend doctrines greatly, especially for a universe God. It is enormously helpful. At Real God level, there is still some help, but it isn't that great of a help anymore. However, Fairy Palace in Sanctuary Alliance is built by the tops in Sanctuary Alliance. In other words, the Emperor-level superb existence in the 10 sanctuaries teamed up, paid a great price and went to great effort to build them. Every Fairy Palace is 100 times more valuable than Real God Hall, or maybe 1,000 times. Hence, cultivating in Fairy Palace naturally brings about the effect of Real God Hall in 100, 1,000 folds and above. Jian Wushuang looked astonished. He didn't know about the effect of comprehending in Fairy Palace, but he knew Real God Hall well. To comprehend doctrine in Real God Hall was much stronger than to comprehend doctrine alone blindly. Even then, Real God Hall was extremely helpful for him. However, the comprehension effect in Fairy Palace was 100 times stronger than in Real God Hall. Maybe there was an exaggeration, but it also meant that Fairy Palace was a perfect place for comprehending doctrines. Fairy Palace is too helpful for a cultivator. As such, countless experts fight to cultivate and comprehend in Fairy Palace. Sanctuary Alliance issued token of the Fairy Palace's legacy in order to balance out the experts in all forces. The token of the Fairy Palace's legacy would be given out once every 300,000 years. Under normal circumstances, every time they give out, some forces in Sanctuary Alliance can get one token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. Some that are extremely strong like Soaring Heaven King Palace, can even get two at once. As for solo experts, according to their contribution for Sanctuary Alliance or the price that they pay, they might receive a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. In short, Sanctuary Alliance will give out 100 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy every 300,000 years. A token of the Fairy Palace's legacy allows a cultivator to opt for one Fairy Palace and comprehend in it for 100 years, Real God Wu Liang said. 100 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy every 300,000 years? And it takes one token to stay in Fairy Palace for 100 years? Jianghu Xuan creased his eyebrows. 100 tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy didn't seem like a small figure, but compared to countless experts in the entire 10 cultivation sanctuaries, it was very few. Plus, every token only allowed them to comprehend for 100 years in Fairy Palace. 100 years was really short. Because there are very few tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy, they're very precious. Just like Lineage of Star, we only get one token every 300,000 years, but there are so many experts in Lineage of Star who are dying to comprehend in Fairy Palace. How do we allocate the quota? Hence, every time when there's a token of the Fairy Palace's legacy, Lineage of Star will elect a few people after repeated discussions. Then Palace Master and the other two Hall Master will make a decision together, Real God Wu Liang said. Jianghu Xuan heard and sighed with emotion. Obviously, Lineage of Star attached great importance to the tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy as well. From the previous time when they issued tokens of the Fairy Palace's legacy, it has only been 240 years. In other words, it has to be another 60,000 years until Lineage of Star obtains another token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. But now Jianghu Xuan, you're so lucky. You killed Real God Shi Jue and got yourself one, Real God Wu Liang complimented. Ha! Jianghu Xuan laughed too. He knew that he had found himself a treasure. In other words, I can go to Fairy Palace in Sanctuary Alliance to comprehend with this token of the Fairy Palace's legacy? Jianghu Xuan asked. It's hard to say. After all, you're not a real god yet. Sanctuary Alliance's Thunderbolt Island had a threshold whereby one must be a real god to enter. Not an ordinary real god, but one must be top void real god at least, and extremely close to the level of an eternal real god. Although your power has reached the criteria, you're yet to reach the realm. I'm not certain if you can head to Thunderbolt Island. It's best if you ask Hall Master Yuan yourself when we return, Real God Wu Liang said. If so, let's return now, Jianghu Xuan said. Real God Wu Liang, Real God Fei Yen didn't hesitate and quickly departed along with Jianghu Xuan. When they returned to Lineage of Star, the three of them immediately went to see Hall Master Yuan. In the cave dwelling that was made of unique crystals. Token of the Fairy Palace's legacy? Hall Master Yuan looked shocked. Jianghu Xuan spread his palm and took out the token of the Fairy Palace's legacy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.